dia. Sejam bem-vindos. É com prazer que damos início a mais essa edição do Arco Futuro. Nos últimos 3 anos, o Arco Futuro vem discutindo arquitetura e urbanismo a fim de contribuir para a melhoria do ambiente urbano construído e da qualidade de vida das cidades brasileiras. Buscamos sempre uma abordagem multidisciplinar, reunindo não apenas arquitetos, mas também empresários, cientistas sociais e ativistas do Brasil e do mundo para trocar ideias e experiências. Este ano, partimos das questões levantadas pelas manifestações ocorridas em todo o Brasil em junho para propor uma ampla reflexão sobre ativismo urbano, recuperação e transformação de espaços públicos e inovação em mobilidade. Quero agradecer aos patrocinadores e parceiros que tornaram este evento possível. São eles Iguatemi, Unir, Braskem, Oi, Deca, Revista Piauí, O Globo e um agradecimento especial à BR Properties, que fez essa reforma fantástica desse espaço que hoje nos acolhe, e à Prefeitura do Rio de Janeiro. Este evento é uma realização da Bem Mais e do Ministério da Cultura. Peço que vocês não se esqueçam de colocar na urna que se encontra na entrada nome, e-mail e telefone para que possamos mandar o certificado digital de participação no Arco Futuro 2013. E, finalmente, por favor, deixem os seus celulares no modo vibratório ou desligados. Para abrir esta edição do Arco Futuro, tenho a honra de convidar Eduarda Larroque, presidente do Instituto Municipal Pereira Passos. Por favor, Eduarda.
Bem, bom dia a todos. É um prazer enorme estar aqui fazendo essa abertura. Marisa, agradeço pelo convite. Então, eu vou falar um pouquinho aqui sobre a minha história. É muito importante todo mundo saber, como um cientista político falou no debate do Fórum Nacional semana passada, qual o óculos que a gente está usando. Cada um tem seu óculos, tem sua visão sobre essas manifestações, e eu queria começar deixando bem claro qual é o meu óculos. Então, eu trabalho, já vai fazer 5 anos, na Prefeitura do Rio, né, e eu venho aqui apresentar, vou falar um pouquinho sobre a situação do Rio, e não só sobre o Instituto Pereira Passos, que é a instituição que eu presido. Eu não sou arquiteta, eu sou economista, tenho doutorado em economia, e vou concentrar aqui a minha fala nos desafios que a gente tem pela frente, resumindo um pouquinho aqui a minha experiência, que no começo da administração do prefeito Eduardo Paes foi como secretária de Fazenda. Eu fui secretária de Fazenda de janeiro de 2009 até julho do ano passado, 2012. 1º de agosto, eu assumi a presidência do Instituto Pereira Passos, que era um instituto de urbanismo, historicamente, e eu vou falar um pouquinho sobre a nova missão do IPP. Tem alguns colegas de prefeitura aqui, que é o Fajardo, que atualmente assumiu essa função de gestão do planejamento urbanístico, da visão integrada do urbanismo na cidade, que vai poder palestrar aqui para vocês sobre essa parte que eu não tenho, mais da arquitetura. E eu vou falar sobre o plano de metas da prefeitura no pós-16. O que a gente quer para o Rio é uma cidade mais competitiva e integrada. Vamos ver se eu consigo usar essa tecnologia aqui. Já fiz alguma besteira? Por favor, me ajudem. Enfim, é difícil. Tem que projetar, que eu apertei o botão errado. É difícil competir com Rock in Rio, numa manhã chuvosa de segunda-feira. O Rio de Janeiro não está oferecendo o melhor que a gente tem para apresentar, né? Mas, enfim, vamos fazer esse desafio aqui. Tá? Eu queria falar das metas sociais da prefeitura. A gente acredita que, para mudar uma realidade, é preciso conhecê-la nos seus detalhes. E eu queria enfatizar a importância do plano de metas da Prefeitura para deixar um legado social e econômico de longo prazo para os cidadãos cariocas pós-2016. Tá? Então, eu vou concentrar aqui um pouco a minha fala nas metas sociais, tá? Que eu tenho um olhar diferenciado para essa parte social agora no IPP, como eu vou conversar mais tarde. Tá? Mas, então, algumas metas aqui. A gente está fazendo uma revolução na saúde do Rio de Janeiro. Acho que a gente está numa posição... É muito difícil ser governo hoje em dia. Parece que é todo mundo contra a gente. E eu queria começar também enfatizando a importância de a gente ter, nos quadros da Prefeitura, pessoas técnicas como a gente tem. É um luxo contar com o Fajardo desde o início da gestão. Modéstia à parte, eu sou uma técnica que vim do setor financeiro para dar minha contribuição para a cidade. É um luxo ter a Maria Silvia planejando as Olimpíadas. Tem um artigo ótimo no jornal dela hoje, que complementa tudo que a Prefeitura está falando com relação ao que eu vou falar aqui hoje, que dá esse olhar mais sobre o social. Tá? Então, assim, a gente acabou de lançar os Cadernos do Rio. Eu vou mostrar aqui. Colocando o diagnóstico social baseado no censo de 2010 por 200 regiões do Rio de Janeiro. Tá? Então, isso captura principalmente a herança recebida e os desafios que a gente tem pela frente. E os desafios são fazer com que esse processo de revitalização gigantesca pelo qual a gente está passando tenha sustentabilidade. E, para que tenha sustentabilidade, é muito importante que a gente avance nos aspectos sociais. Então, estou focando esse olhar propositalmente, tá? E depois a parte mais urbanística, vocês vão ter o restante da programação para discutir. Então, basicamente, quando a gente chegou, o Rães, nosso secretário de Saúde, desde janeiro de 2009, está promovendo uma revolução na saúde do Rio de Janeiro, com um olhar de prevenção ao invés de emergencial. Então, a gente vai atingir 70%, é uma meta da Prefeitura, em 2016, de cobertura da estratégia de saúde da família, que é uma questão preventiva absolutamente fundamental. Hoje em dia, nas favelas pacificadas, a gente já tem uma cobertura de 77% de cobertura. Então, isso é muito importante para que a gente tenha, em 2020, quando a gente conseguir fazer esse censo de novo, dados substancialmente melhores do ponto de vista social. Basicamente, eu vou passar rápido aqui. Eu queria enfatizar a parte de educação. Educação também é um luxo, contar com a Cláudia Costin, há quase 5 anos à frente da pasta, e fazendo também uma revolução em termos de gestão. Tá? E, basicamente, a gente tem como meta, até 2016, ter 35% de escola em tempo integral, 9 horas, 7 horas de estudo, mais 2 horas complementando com cultura e esporte. Então, a gente tem uma fábrica de escolas que foi projetada pelo IPP, através de uma programação de otimização dos espaços disponíveis. Começou com o planejamento da escola, e aí agora aumentou para o planejamento de saúde, para o planejamento de habitação, mostrando a necessidade da integração de políticas públicas. Essa é a principal função do IPP. Bem, são várias metas, estão disponíveis no nosso site. Então, esse é um canal, foi uma apresentação que foi feita a semana passada pelo Pedro Paulo, que é o secretário da Casa Civil, para o Conselho da Cidade, que é um grupo de 150 pessoas que se reúne com temas para tratar de temas específicos, e, na reunião da semana passada, o Pedro Paulo prestou contas com relação a todas as metas e ao andamento das mesmas. Então, assim, a minha mensagem aqui com essa primeira parte da apresentação é muito importante separar o joio do trigo em termos de gestão pública. Então, a gente tem canal de transparência, a gente tem canal de diálogo de comunicação. Então, por favor, vão lá e busquem essas informações com relação às metas da Prefeitura, com as quais eu acredito que a gente vai conseguir um legado social e econômico muito forte para a nossa cidade. Tá? Então, tem metas com relação a moradias, controle das áreas ocupadas pela favela, a parte de bicicleta, né, a gente vai chegar a 450 quilômetros, fora a parte fundamental, que eu acho que vai ser discutida muito aqui, que a Maria Silvia coloca muito bem no artigo de hoje, que, de certa forma, complementa essa minha apresentação aqui, mostrando o que a Prefeitura está fazendo, e o retrato do Rio de Janeiro, os 150 quilômetros de BRT, que vão transformar completamente a estrutura econômica e urbanística da cidade do Rio de Janeiro. Tem um cartão Família Carioca, que, na verdade, complementa a parte do cartão Família, que é muito importante, está integrado com a parte da saúde. Enfim, existe meta, e meta com transversalidade. Então, a gente está endereçando as questões, e a administração do Eduardo Paes, eu gostaria de terminar assim, essa primeira parte da apresentação, enfatizando que é muito redistribuidora de oportunidades. A gente consegue fazer um Porto Maravilha, que é uma parceria público-privada de 8 bilhões de reais, a maior do Brasil, para financiar com dinheiro privado essa parte de revitalização urbanística, para que a gente consiga gastar nos serviços públicos essenciais, transporte público, educação, saúde. O orçamento da educação, quando eu cheguei na Secretaria de Fazenda, era de 2 bilhões, estimado para o ano de 2009, o orçamento da educação hoje é 4 bilhões e 800. Então, assim, mais do que dobrou o orçamento da educação, além de todas as melhorias com relação à gestão. Então, eu queria assim, enfatizar muito a importância da continuidade de planos, de metas, acordos de gestão e meritocracia, que é absolutamente fundamental para aumentar a eficiência na gestão pública, né? Então, assim, na reunião do Conselho, também tem todas as informações no site da Prefeitura, teve uma ênfase muito grande sobre a educação, porque os professores da educação fizeram muitas greves, estão em greve, eu acho, ainda, e um dos pontos principais era contra a política de meritocracia, e que eu particularmente acho um absurdo, é absolutamente fundamental sistemas de avaliação, de análise de desempenho, de performance no setor público. Então, acho que assim, é muito importante conhecer tudo isso. Tá? O programa de metas está institucionalizado na Câmara dos Vereadores, que é absolutamente fundamental. Então, queria enfatizar isso. Falar um pouquinho sobre o IPP. Quando o prefeito me convidou para assumir o IPP lá em mais ou menos junho de 2012, foi por conta do programa UPP Social, que eu sempre mostrei para o prefeito uma vontade de estar mais diretamente ligada à parte social. Eu acho que na Fazenda a gente teve uma performance muito boa, a gente saiu de um orçamento de 10 bi para 22 bi no período de 4 anos, a gente conseguiu 3 upgrades, né, das agências de rating internacional, a gente é o único ente subnacional que tem o mesmo nível de rating do governo federal. A gente conseguiu um empréstimo de $1 bilhão com o Banco Mundial, com o qual a gente conseguiu já investir 600 milhões, uma economia de 25% do valor da dívida. Enfim, então a gente teve muitos avanços, mas eu acho que para dar sustentabilidade a tudo isso, o mais importante é o legado social, uma parte mais inclusiva, de mais participação. E então, eu descobri no IPP uma fonte, vários diamantes. Vários diamantes para quê? Para justamente fazer o que a gente identificou como sendo o core business do IPP, gestão do conhecimento, que é fazer as informações a favor da promoção do desenvolvimento sustentável da nossa cidade através de uma agenda de articulação. E estava conversando com o meu colega palestrante aqui, na sequência, ele falou, tem alguma experiência similar no mundo? A gente não sabe e gostaria de saber e de conhecer, porque eu particularmente acho muito importante a existência de centros de informação qualificada e de articulação. o mais difícil para a gente conseguir eficiência na gestão pública é essa possibilidade de integração. Então, eu sou defensora dessa tese, meu colega Fajardo também, o Laudemar, que deve estar aqui também, que é a pessoa responsável pela parte de relacionamento institucional da prefeitura, para mostrar tudo que a gente está fazendo, e a gente quer ser uma referência internacional nessa parte de articulação entre o público, o privado e o terceiro setor. Então, assim, o conteúdo desse programa, Marisa, assim, me encanta, me maravilha, assim, é a cartilha que eu venho pregando já há coisa de 3 anos, que a gente precisa de parcerias público-privadas e com o povo, que seria, né, o que eu chamo de PPP3, que é absolutamente fundamental. Informação para isso é absolutamente fundamental. O nosso lema é assim, o que a gente vende é o Rio a gente conhece, a gente é um grande parceiro de informação e quer ser um grande canal de diálogo com a sociedade. Tá? Bem, a gente identificou como sendo um dos grandes desafios nesse Cadernos do Rio, que é esse diagnóstico, são 10 temas, dentre os quais 2 transversais, que é a juventude e o tema favela, não favela, comparando as situações do ponto de vista de condições de vida, demografia e tudo mais, dados bem detalhados, e a gente descobriu uma grande oportunidade que existe no Rio e no Brasil como um todo, que é o bônus demográfico. E, por outro lado, o imenso desafio, que é a nossa juventude, e particularmente a parte da nossa juventude que nem estuda, nem trabalha e nem procura emprego. E esse número no Rio é 16,2%, muito preocupante. Assim, é mais ou menos parecido com a média nacional, mas o pior é a tendência, que de 2000 para 2010 passou de 12 para 16. Então, é algo que exige um olhar muito detalhado, e que é uma herança, e que eu acho que só através de parcerias público-privadas e com o terceiro setor que a gente vai conseguir endereçar e avançar. Então, por isso, eu criei no IPP, assim, o IPP, então, é um grande centro de informações e que se direciona para o que é mais estratégico no momento. O mais estratégico no momento nos parece ser desenvolvimento econômico inclusivo, né? O que a gente chama de inclusão produtiva. Então, transformei a Diretoria de Desenvolvimento Econômico Estratégico em desenvolvimento das favelas. Tá? Então, basicamente, a gente tem uma agenda ali no IPP, que é esse programa da UPP Social, que visa promover o desenvolvimento urbano, social e econômico das favelas, com muito diálogo, diálogo com resultados, o que a gente prega, o que a gente faz, muito baseado em informação, toda essa agenda de articulação. A gente está agora articulando com um acordo de gestão das secretarias finalísticas, porque a nossa equipe, que tem o Pedro Veiga, que está aí, vai ficar aqui ao longo desses dias, que é a equipe de gestão territorial. Na verdade, ele identifica e qualifica a demanda, mas quem coloca a luz é a Rio Luz, que é uma empresa da prefeitura. Quem coleta o lixo é a Conlurb, que é uma empresa da prefeitura. Então, na verdade, a gente precisa amarrar nos acordos de gestão com a secretaria finalística para que a gente tenha, de fato, o resultado e a etapa que a gente está fazendo agora. A partir do ano que vem, a gente vai sair com um grande programa de ações nas favelas pacificadas, a partir da identificação das demandas por parte desse programa UPP Social. A gente faz mobilização em parcerias com o setor privado, governo estadual, governo federal e terceiro setor, e para promover muito fortemente melhoria de serviços públicos e inclusão produtiva. Então, basicamente, o que a gente está falando é isso. A base de todo o trabalho do IPP, de articulação, etc., é a informação, é essa parte de conhecimento, e que foi, no caso das favelas pacificadas, o que a gente tem... Desculpa. É a necessidade de uma equipe de gestão territorial, porque é um terreno que até então era desconhecido. Então, na verdade, o IPP Social visa promover melhorias em termos de urbanos, econômicos e sociais, nas favelas pacificadas do Rio, que teve um programa de pacificação e para expulsão dos traficantes de droga, que tinham controle armado. Então, para complementar esse processo de pacificação e consolidar a paz, a gente precisa levar serviço público qualificado e desenvolver aquelas localidades. Mas é um terreno que até então era desconhecido e que existe muita desconfiança com relação ao serviço público e tudo mais. Então, precisa de uma agenda muito forte de articulação, de identificação, de conhecimento, de construção de uma base de confiança para que a gente consiga ter resultado. E, para mim, eficiência de serviço público é a percepção de melhora do serviço público. Então, é muito importante essa parte de articulação. Tá? Para a gente fazer o quê? Casar, através de ações integradas, a demanda com a oferta. A oferta vem através da gestão institucional, é o Valverde, nosso arquiteto, que também está aqui, vai poder discutir com vocês ao longo do seminário, a parte de articulação institucional com todos os órgãos que oferecem serviços nessas comunidades. Então, essa é a metodologia da UPP social. Mas essa, eu acho, que é a metodologia mais funcional para qualquer agenda de articulação e que provavelmente é alguma coisa muito similar que aconteceu no caso do Highlines, que realmente assim, é fantástico, eu já corri lá, é lindo, então parabéns para os palestrantes que vão me suceder aqui, é um caso fantástico e que eu acho que é um pouco essa estrutura de articulação que é necessária para desenvolvimento em locos territoriais, né? Então, alguns produtos que a UPP faz, assim, uma base muito qualificada de informação, a gente está mapeando para incluir a favela no mapa oficial da cidade, primeiro direito básico de cidadania, ter um CEP, então a gente está mapeando todas as ruelazinhas, tem um sistema de coleta de informações, agora com o pacote que a gente vai anunciar, 80% dessas demandas vão ser endereçadas, então é basicamente informação para a transformação, o que o UPP faz. E isso é uma imagem de uma colmeia que a gente desenvolveu num projeto que a gente conduz, que é a Rede Comunidade Integrada. E comunidade, tem uma discussão assim, grande, se a gente deve chamar as favelas de favelas ou de comunidade. Eu brinco assim, com os meus amigos, às vezes acadêmicos, etc. Gente, vamos parar de discutir qual dos dois usar e vamos fazer e melhorar as condições? Então, assim, muitas vezes é muito importante trazer a academia mais para perto. E o IPP também é esse canal de diálogo com a academia, porque a gente tem um conselho de informações estratégicas da cidade, que é esse canal com a academia. Então, é muito importante a academia também estar junto. Então, eu falo parcerias público-privadas com o terceiro setor, que é o terceiro P de povo, e com a academia, que tem que estar mais junto da gente e das necessidades reais da vida moderna. Então, uma grande colmeia que se forma com o objetivo de a comunidade ter um interesse comum. No caso, é um interesse de desenvolvimento das favelas, que é comum à associação de moradores, que vê com maus olhos o servidor público, os políticos, ou bem, ou, enfim, o policial, o cientista política de esquerda. Então, é um locus, um tecido social extremamente complexo, e só através dessas redes que vão se interligando que a gente vai conseguir evoluir nessa agenda de sustentabilidade. Então, é a ideia de construir essa grande rede comunidade integrada. Aí são os detalhes de como é que está funcionando o Fórum Nacional. E aí, só para fechar aqui minha apresentação, eu queria convidar a todos para o Rio Social Investors Day. Enfim, um pouco de mania de evento em inglês, né? Não devia chamar assim, mas quando eu era secretária de Fazenda, eu organizava muito, assim, eu acredito muito no mercado de capitais como sendo uma fonte muito importante para o desenvolvimento econômico, social e ambiental. E eu estou tentando trazer o mercado de capitais mais para perto dessas questões de parcerias público-privadas e com o terceiro setor, mais avanços, mais profissionalização do terceiro setor, enfim. Tem mercados, economistas gostam de mercados completos, para que a gente possa ter eficiência. E certamente existe muito mercado para ser completado para a gente conseguir avançar nessa agenda de sustentabilidade, e eu estou tentando trazer o mercado de capitais. Mas lá em 2009, 2010, quando a gente começou a conseguir os investment grades e etc., eu tinha reuniões, eu criei o Grupo Financeiro Carioca para tentar revitalizar o setor financeiro no Rio de Janeiro. E aí, fazendo a apresentação do que a gente estava fazendo para as empresas de RI, veio uma ideia de uma dessas empresas, de uma dessas diretoras de RI da empresa, falando assim, nossa, Duda, isso que vocês estão fazendo é uma mudança muito grande, a gente tem que tocar bumbo com relação a isso. E aí a gente teve a ideia de criar o Rio Investors Day, que aconteceu em 2010 e em 2011, com uma grande CEO Conference, assim, padrão internacional, no Copacabana Palace, todas as principais empresas abertas do Brasil, mostrando para o mundo o que a gente estava fazendo aqui no Rio, como isso poderia se reverter positivamente para elas. Também um exemplo de parceria público-privada, não teve um tostão de dinheiro público, foi 100% financiado pelas empresas, para mostrar para os seus investidores. Então, evento top, que foi esse logo aí, mas agora o foco nosso é social. Então, eu fiz essa passagem do Rio Investors Day, que a gente, lá em 2010, precisava anunciar para o mundo todo o processo de revitalização econômica que a cidade estava passando, e agora o momento é de discussão do social, como é que a gente avança nessa agenda de sustentabilidade. Então, é uma ideia de mercado de capitais, tem alguns artigos no nosso site, tem alguns artigos meus aí nessa linha de trazer mercado de capitais para trabalhar por causas socioambientais, através de família de fundos, e, enfim, várias mudanças que a gente vai apresentar nesse evento. Tá? A nossa missão é construir uma cidade integrada. Muito obrigada mais uma vez pela oportunidade de fazer essa abertura.
Obrigado, Eduarda. No último Arco Futuro que nós fizemos em São Paulo, o prefeito Haddad compareceu e ele fez um comentário que acho que ilustra a apresentação da Duda. O Rio de Janeiro hoje atrai o dobro de investimentos da cidade de São Paulo. Então, alguma coisa está sendo bem feita aqui. Parabéns. Bom, agora iniciaremos o nosso primeiro painel, que tem como tema ativismo nas comunidades. O nosso ponto de partida é o High Line de Nova York. É uma antiga linha férrea suspensa que, graças ao empenho da sociedade civil, foi transformada em um dos mais visitados parques públicos da cidade. Nós convidamos aqui para contar essa história hoje o Joshua David e o Robert Hammond, que são os fundadores da ONG Friends of the High Line. Joshua e Robert se conheceram em 1999 em uma associação de bairro quando se discutia a provável demolição da antiga linha de trens. E, ao longo dos anos seguintes, eles se mobilizaram a opinião pública e coordenaram o levantamento de fundos e as ações políticas que resultariam, na década seguinte, na criação do parque. É uma história muito pertinente. Nós temos dois lugares nas cidades onde o Arco Futuro vai acontecer que são passíveis dessa discussão, com situações e contextos diferentes, e, de fato, a história deles acho que acrescenta muito aqui como uma experiência de muito sucesso. E a gente vai ouvir hoje Joshua e Robert. Please come up.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Bom dia. Thank you to all of you for coming out today, and thank you especially to Arc Futuro for welcoming us to your beautiful city and allowing us to share a little bit of the story of the High Line with you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the High Line, because I think it informs a lot about what happened going forward. So originally the trains used to run down the street. This was 10th Avenue, and it was called Death Avenue because so many people were run over by the trains that the railroad hired a guy on horseback to run in front of the trains, and he became known as the West Side Cowboy. But people were still killed about once a month, so they elevated the trains, and it was finished in 1934, And this was always mostly for freight. It wasn't, some people think it was for passengers, but it was really a freight train that serviced the industrial part of Manhattan on the west side. And in some cases, it actually even went through buildings. These are some of the warehouses it served. And this is what I first saw. I lived in the neighborhood, and what I fell in love with was this steel structure, this sort of industrial ruin, that ran through my neighborhood. And I read an article in the New York Times that it was going to be demolished in the summer of �99. And I assumed someone must be working to preserve it. In New York, everything has a preservation group attached to it. And I thought, I could volunteer. I called around. No one was doing anything. But I heard it was on the agenda of a community board meeting. So I went to that community board meeting. I sat next to Josh, who I didn't know at the time. And at the end of the meeting, we realized that we were the only two people interested in saving it. Most people actually wanted to tear it down, or they didn't care. So we actually asked for a tour to go up on the line from the railroad that owned it. And this is what we found. We loved from the street this industrial structure, but up on top was this natural wildscape where wildflowers had taken over, running through 1.5 miles and right in the middle of Manhattan with views of the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, the river. So that's when we decided to start this group, Friends of the High Line. And neither one of us had any experience in this. My background in college, I was a history major. At the time, in the 90s, I had worked as a part-time artist, but also worked in internet startups. And Josh was a travel writer. People always assume to start something like this, you have to be an expert, or you need to be an architect or a city planner. And as we'll go through this presentation, you'll see how it was actually helpful not to be an expert. And when we started, people also think we had a very clear plan of what we were going to do. But really, our vision was this was 1.5 miles of Manhattan that was running through our neighborhoods, and we thought something different should be happen. But when we started, we didn't have any relevant experience, we didn't have any money, and we really didn't even almost have a clear plan.
With all of those lacks of experience and expertise, one of the things that we decided to do very early on was go to an incredible graphic designer in New York City, Paula Scher at Pentagram, and ask her to create a logo for our new organization and a whole graphic identity for everything we did. So this is the logo that Paula created for us very early in 1999, right at the beginning of our work. And it did a couple of things for us. First, when we created materials and used the logo and the whole graphic identity, it made us look like an organization that was much more mature and organized and successful than we actually were. And the other thing that it did was it began to convey a message to people that design was going to be one of our top priorities, that when we ultimately did get the chance to design and transform the High Line, that we would design it at a very high quality so that you would have something that was as innovative and unusual as the High Line itself. Another thing that we had to do early on was there was a great lack of awareness about the High Line. You only saw it from the street, that the steel picture that Robert showed before. And people didn't know what was up there. And we took some of our own pictures, but they weren't very good. They didn't make it look very impressive. So we brought in Joel Sternfeld, a wonderful American photographer who spent a year up on the High Line documenting it. And these photographs really created great public awareness of the incredible opportunity of the High Line and became one of our chief advocacy tools. But they also did something else for us. One of our founding board members, Phil Ahrens, advised us. We had a natural inclination to go out and create designs and make renderings of what we were going to build. And Phil said, hold off on that. You've got these amazing images that really captivate people's imagination. If you put a design out, there are all sorts of things that people can object to. Just use these images. And so we did for a long time. We didn't put any designs out. We allowed people to look at these incredible images that Joel Sternfeld had taken for us and have people create their own images in their mind about what the High Line could be. There was a precedent. There was about 10 years before we started, a rail line in Paris had been turned into a park. It was very different from what we were ultimately trying to do. It was a government-led effort. Ours was a community-led effort. They did a very traditional park design on it. We wanted to do something more unexpected and innovative. But nonetheless, it was an incredible tool for us in advancing the conversation. Another great tool for us actually was the government's opposition to the project. This is Mayor Giuliani. He was the third of 3 mayors to have a policy of tearing down the High Line, but he was mayor when we came along. And he happened to be not particularly popular at the moment that we were starting the project. And so we had to go to great lengths to stop the mayor's administration from tearing down the High Line. We had to sue the city of New York, which required that we hire lawyers and begin to fundraise, which was a great strengthening of our organization. But also, it can be great to mobilize a constituency to be fighting City Hall. If we showed pictures, the Joel Sternfeld pictures that we just showed you, and that didn't convince people, we could say Mayor Giuliani is against it, and people would say, well, then it must be a good idea. We also faced great opposition from the real estate community. And one of the chief arguments they used against us was that there was no money to do this. There was no public money, and if there was public money, it would be better spent elsewhere. To begin to understand the motivation of these property owners, they had sold easements that allowed the High Line to land on their property back in the 1930s. So they saw an opportunity when the train stopped running on it to force its removal and then have a windfall by being able to build in that developable area. So that was what was motivating their opposition. But the city also wanted to know what the economic impacts of such a project might be. We were right after 9/11, and the city was in very challenging financial straits. So we commissioned an economic feasibility study to look at how the High Line might benefit the city economically. We looked at a couple of different factors, the way that the High Line would create a district that was known for the presence of this incredible park, the High Line district, and that you didn't have to have a property that was necessarily right next to the High Line, but it would convey value on a larger area all around it. We also looked at the way that proximity to parks creates value in New York City. The great example for us was Central Park, which within just a few years of its construction was already raising property values so much around it that it paid for itself. Central Park is a very unusual case, and we didn't want to base our argument on that, so we looked at small pocket parks around New York City to see how proximity to those parks affected real estate values. What we ended up being able to demonstrate to the city was if they invested $100 million in the High Line's construction over a course of 20 years, they would get a return of $262 million based on the way that properties would increase in value around it. That was a very conservative assessment. We wanted to be conservative because it was a project that was considered very outlandish at the time. But it's actually, now that we've built the High Line and seen what's actually happened, the numbers are actually very different. It cost a little bit more than we said it was going to be. That was $150 million, although that was not all city money, as we'll tell you later. But the revenues back to the city are much higher than originally projected, more like $900 million over a 20-year period. With that economic study helped bring the city on board and interest them in supporting the High Line, but we still had the very intense opposition of the people who own private property underneath the High Line. And so what we did was begin working with the city to develop a system that would remove that property owner opposition. And there was a great precedent in New York at Grand Central Terminal. It was a similar situation. A historic property that had unused developable air rights up above it, and the owners of the property, a railroad, wanted to tear down the station in order to be able to develop in that envelope. And the city created a new system for the distribution of those rights. In New York City, you can only sell your development rights to the property directly adjacent to you. So in the case of Grand Central, they created a new system that allowed them to be sold more liberally over a larger area. And so that's what we applied to the High Line, a different version of that system. So there was new development sites identified in the High Line area along the avenues. development rights identified over the High Line, and a mechanism established that would allow those development rights over the High Line to move to the new development sites.
So although we had our new mayor, Giuliani was against it, our new mayor, Mike Bloomberg, in 2002 was supportive of the project. But still, most people had no idea what this is. Now, you know, people all over the world know the High Line. But when we were starting this, people in our own neighborhood had no idea what this is. And, you know, Josh talked about using the Joel Sternfeld photos instead of designs. But in 2003, we wanted to start thinking about what we would actually do up there. But we didn't own the structure. The property owners were still suing us to tear it down, and we had no money to build it. So we couldn't do a regular design competition. So what we did was an ideas competition. And what we said, the ideas don't have to be realistic. They can be whatever you want, whatever you can imagine up there. And this is one of our favorites for many reasons. But it was a mile-long lap pool, you know, running through Manhattan. And designs came, we got over 720 entries from all over the world. This was one from Russia that was more of almost an art piece. This was a political manifesto where you would turn the High Line into a park on the top. In the middle, you would imprison your citizens in the I-beams of the High Line, and then there would be a pool underneath. I don't know what the pool has to do with it, but this is, I think, taking off the word of high, maybe. And then this is an interesting one. This is really not looking at design of what happens, how you design the High Line, but what's the programming? What do you do in and around the High Line? And this, and we'll talk a little bit, this has become such an important part. You know, the design is critical, but also how people use it is also important. And this is one of our other favorites, was the urban roller coaster. You know, you look into people's apartments and then zoom down. Someone should build that somewhere. And we had an exhibition in Grand Central, because although we were a local community group, we wanted people to think about this not just a project for our own neighborhood. It is most important for the neighborhood, but this should be of citywide importance, and everyone in the city should care about this. So we did the exhibition at Grand Central, where a lot of people, this is where people first started really hearing about the project. Now, one of the advantages of Josh and I not being an architect or planner is that we couldn't design it. And we didn't really even know what should go up there. So we always said, you know, the city and the neighborhood should ultimately decide what was up there. So after we did the design competition, we also didn't want to make the neighborhood nervous that we were going to build a roller coaster in their neighborhood. So we did the first of a series of dozens of community input sessions. And this is the postcard that we sent out to sort of our neighbors and anyone that had signed up. You know, what do you want? And we've subsequently done, you know, dozens of these. And what I find happens a lot in city or projects is people go to the community after they've done the design. And so this community sort of knows no one really wants to hear, you know, maybe you can tweak things here and here, but when you've done the design, there's not that much room for input. So this is a hearing we did before we even did a design competition to inform what the actual guidelines for the design competition would be. And then subsequently, once we picked our design team, the design team went back to the community, not just at the end of the design process, but several times in the middle of the design process. So you get a real feedback. The other thing, you know, I think one of the reasons people don't do this is they think if you ask the community what they want, you always have to do exactly what they said. And what we found, the community said a lot of things that we didn't do, that our designers didn't do. But what happened was the designers had a dialogue with the community and could explain why they're not doing certain things and taking some of their advice. And it's not just about, you know, community input. This is a project where we took people's pictures in front of that Joel Sternfeld photo, and then we pasted them around the community. So people could start imagining sort of themselves on the High Line. This is another side of the community. We weren't sure if we should show, if this was appropriate to show, but we decided it was Rio, so we went ahead and showed it. This is a poster that Josh and I did. We did a talk called Behind the Bushes, The Secret Homo History of the High Line. Josh and I are both gay. And when we were looking at support, and we thought a lot of projects, how they happen in New York is sort of wealthy people on the Upper East Side, which is sort of the fancy neighborhood, decide they want to do something, and then it happens. But they weren't really interested in our project. So we had to look at who are our friends, who are the people that are living around the High Line. And it tends to be there's a large gay neighborhood there. And so a lot of our supporters came from this gay neighborhood. And it sort of created a different kind of support and a different kind of feeling than a lot of preservation groups had. But you can't just rely on pictures of naked men to build projects. And you do need your politicians and elected officials. This is a picture of our mayor, Hillary Clinton, who was our senator, Amanda Burden. And you know, this really is a public, you can fight City Hall when we fought, but you can't really build these kind of projects without a close partnership with the city. And I love this picture because none of them are looking at each other. I don't know if Brazilian politics learned that. They can stand together, but they don't have to acknowledge each other.
So with the support of the city secured and the needs of the underlying property owners dealt with through the rezoning, we were able to go to the place where we actually could start actually designing what we wanted to do on the High Line. So we started the real design competition to select a team to design the High Line. I love this photograph because I think it really shows the central challenge that we presented to them. There was this incredible landscape that existed up there. It demonstrated the power of nature to reclaim the most monumental industrial structures, and it was just magical. But if you brought just this small group of people up there, even after a visit like this, it would all be trampled down. And if you were to open it to the public at large, it would be destroyed. And it wasn't safe for public access. So the real challenge to the competition was, how do you create an environment on the High Line that refers back to this original condition and yet is accessible to the public? The teams that we invited had to be multidisciplinary. There had to be architects, landscape architects, horticulturists, lighting designers, security consultants, historic preservation consultants, engineers, et cetera, et cetera. So they were big and complex teams. We received 51 expressions of interest. We narrowed those down to 7, and then we narrowed them down to 4 teams. Zaha Hadid had a team with landscape architect Diana Balmari. This was her design. It was much more architectural than landscape. We had a landscape architect-led proposal by Michael van Valkenburg, another architect-led proposal by Stephen Hall, and then with the team that we ultimately selected, who you'll hear from later today, James Corner Field Operations and Diller Scofidio and Renfro, with Pete Udolf doing the planting design. And very early on, it was clear to Robert and me that this was absolutely the team that had tapped into the thing that we wanted to see created on the High Line. And you can see this is from one of the competition boards that they submitted to us and presented to us very early on in the process. And it shows how they were able to really address that central challenge of opening the High Line to the public and yet retaining this wild quality that was so compelling in the original. And they'll tell you more about it, so I won't spend a lot of time on this, but one of the center pieces of it was the introduction of this planked walkway system that allowed the greenery to push up through the hardscape, which really became elemental in the entire design. So we opened the first section in 2009, about 10 years after we'd first started our work. And we opened the second section in 2011.
And the High Line's not done. We still have another third to go. And you can see the part in red where it goes around the rail yards, which is the last undeveloped site in Manhattan. And it was going to be the site of the New York wanted to get the 2012 Olympics, and they were going to put a football stadium right over this site. We didn't get the stadiums. This didn't get built. And now they're building, it's going to be a mixed-use site. It's going to be larger than downtown Houston. I don't know what the comparable would be here, but I think a lot of downtown Rio would fit in what they're looking at. These buildings are, as you can see, are taller than the Empire State Building. They just started construction on the first one. There you can see it. And the High Line goes around this site. And the design team's going to go through sort of to show you actually what's going to be up there. My favorite part is this last part where you can see in the green where we're going to have this walkway, a temporary walkway, so you'll be able to experience this wild landscape that we first fell in love with. And what's happened since we opened the Highline is it has created a boom in development. This is a map of over 40 different projects that have happened since the Highline opened. And keep in mind, you know, the Highline opened right at the worst part of the economic crash for New York. And you know, one of the other exciting things, it's not just a new development, but it's encouraged developers to hire great architects. There's a point where you can stand here at 18th Street and see a building by Shigeru Ban, Jean Nouvel, Frank Gehry, Neil Denari. Zaha Hadid is just starting a building a little to the north of this. And to the south, the Whitney Museum is moving. They've always been on the Upper East Side. They're moving to the base of the Highline in this building designed by Renzo Piano that will open in 2015. It's already created $2 billion in new economic development and a variety of jobs and other projects. So when we first started the Highline, we thought the Highline would get about 300,000 visitors a year. That's how much a mid-sized cultural institution, the Guggenheim or the Whitney, get in New York. Last year we had about 4.5 million visitors. This year we might hit 5 million. And just to give you a comparison, so there's our 4.5 million visitors. The Statue of Liberty gets about 3 million. The Museum of Modern Art gets about 2.5 million visitors.
So we're thrilled that so many people are coming to the Highline, and it's become such a well-loved place both for New Yorkers and for visitors. But that level of visitorship also has great challenges. We're a park, we're free of charge, whereas some of the other cultural institutions that were listed up on that graph, each of those visitors pays an admission price, which helps defer the cost of it. For us, each visitor creates more cost. And so the way that we have to address that, because there isn't enough public money from the city in New York City to fund all of our parks at the level that we'd like to maintain the Highline, we've followed the model that was created in Central Park. Central Park in the 1970s, when parks funding got very dramatically cut, fell into great disrepair. And the parks budget is always the first thing to get cut in city budgets, and it was really decimated. And so a group of private New Yorkers came forward to create a non-profit conservancy to raise private funds to make Central Park better. And they established a model by which Central Park has become one of the great gems of the city again. And without public funds from the city to operate the park, that's what we've had to do as well. So Friends of the Highline started as an advocacy group to get the Highline built. We're now a conservancy that's charged with the maintenance and operations of the park. We raise all of the money for all of the people that you see working up there, every gardener, every groundskeeper, every maintenance person, our educators, our program staff, our administrators. They're all paid for through private contributions. And so some of our challenges are just maintaining the environment of the park. It was designed at a very high level, and we've always believed that the really transformative experience of being up there is being in a landscape that's impeccably maintained. And you can see some of the challenges of doing that here. We're a landscape that's up in the air over the city streets. And the linear quality of it also presents challenges. With so many visitors, we're constantly emptying trash. Our staff has to sometimes walk a mile to empty a trash can. And many of our staff members in doing this work walk 10 miles a day in the course of a day's work on the Highline. Though we do have irrigation on the Highline now, the intricacy of the design means in very hot weather we have to do a lot of hand watering. Even when our staff gets up and starts working very early in the morning, and even on a rainy day when we have low visitorship, they're also acting as ambassadors, and so people are asking them a lot of questions, and it can be challenging for them to get their work done. We do clear snow and keep the Highline open in winter. This is a huge challenge to clear a mile of walkway up there from the snow in an elevated condition is really a tough job, but we've only been closed one snow day. Much of the time that we were building the Highline, we built our community through involving people in fighting to save the Highline and helping us build the Highline. now that we're largely constructed, not complete, but largely constructed, we're beginning to build and maintain our community through programs. So this goes back to the slide from the design competition that Robert showed you about all the different programmatic possibilities on the High Line. That's now become one of the central ways that we're building a community around the High Line. So we have Arriba as a Latin music festival that we do 4 times a summer. We do children's programs to bring families up there. This is a program where kids create constructions that are inspired by a kit that was developed around the High Line called the Workyard Kit with industrial influenced pieces. We have an education program that's reaching some 3,000 New York City school children every year. And recently, our neighborhood is perceived generally to be an affluent neighborhood, but there are 2 very large chunks of low-income residents that are actually our largest groups of neighbors that live close to the High Line in 2 publicly subsidized housing complexes. We found that they weren't using the High Line as much as we thought they would, and so we've done a targeted program to reach out to them and involve them more fully in the life of the High Line. Dedicated staff to make that program work. And one of the programs is called Green Corps, where teens from these residential complexes are trained to work in the planting beds and also learn about sustainable job opportunities throughout the city. We also have another group of teens that works at developing cultural programs that are of interest to them and their peer group. This was a movie festival that they curated, picking movies that were of interest to them, different from movies that we picked for another movie festival that we did of our own. They also, this summer, did a series of teen parties that were all themed to interest themselves and their peers. This was a boardwalk-themed teen party. It was really an incredible event.
The High Line runs through Chelsea, which is the heart of the gallery district. There's more galleries in Chelsea than anywhere in the world, but they're really not that publicly accessible. You know, the galleries often really don't want you walking in there. And even if they do, it's hard to figure out what's showing. So we wanted to bring contemporary art to the High Line, to the public that comes to the neighborhood. And so these are some of the things. This is the only one that's permanent. It's by Spencer Finch. A river runs through it at Chelsea Market. But almost all the art we do now is all temporary. So it's always changing. There's always another reason to come back. This is a sort of stylized bird feeder by Sarah Z. We do a billboard every other month. This is by John Baldessari. We did this at Christmas time, the $100,000 bill. This is Gilbert and George billboard that's up right now in New York. And so if you come, every other month there's a different artwork on this billboard. We also do movies. There's 2 places. You know, video art is something most people don't get to see. Most video art is never seen. So at 22nd Street and at 14th Street, we have these called Channel 14 and Channel 22nd that's always showing different video art. Then sometimes we do really big pieces. This is by El Natsui, a Nigerian-born artist, where we took over a blank wall that might have been covered with advertising or just left blank, where he did this sculpture. And then in that last part of the High Line, the rail yards that we haven't opened, we did an exhibition by Carol Beauvais. This is up now. So it's closed to the public. The only way you can see it is you sign up for free tours. And 12,000 people have signed up for these tours. So it's only 12 at a time, so people get to experience the High Line sort of how we did in these small groups. Another thing we do is through food. You know, the most popular activity, people think, that what do people like to do in exercise? You think exercise. I mean, what do people like to do in parks? You might think exercise, but actually the most popular activity is eating. And so we did something called Social Soup Experiment, where we set up these long tables and served these communal meals. And so you're eating with other people. We have that coming up in a few weeks. We do it every fall. But I think, so these are all ways that we've programmed the High Line, that we, you know, think about how people want to use the High Line. But to me, the real success of the High Line and the design is things that we don't plan. So when we opened the High Line, we accidentally had one of our lights, sort of like this, shining into someone's bedroom. And she called up and said, you know, you have a light shining into my bedroom. Can you fix it? And we said yes, but we didn't. And so, because we were busy. And so like any, you know, good New Yorker, she turned it around, and she brought one of her friends who is a cabaret singer to stand on her fire escape and serenade the people on the High Line. And people loved it, and it became known, and she would do it every week. It became called the High Line Renegade Cabaret. And eventually the fire department shut it down because that's not what you're supposed to be doing on fire escapes. But to me, that's the real magic of the High Line is these mistakes, of these things you don't plan for. The High Line was built because of the mistakes of people, you know, running over people. Then it turned out it wasn't used very long, and it turned into weeds, and then we've turned it into a park. And so that's what, you know, our dream for it is, that continues to evolve, and the communities in the future can come up with different ways of using it. So thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to take.
Obrigado, Joshua e Robert, por essa fantástica apresentação. Quero lembrar que o Joshua e o Robert são autores do livro High Line, A História do Parque Suspenso de Nova York, e que será lançado amanhã pela Bay Editora aqui no foyer do teatro. Quem quiser aparecer, é aberto o lançamento. Bom, vamos agora complementar a história do High Line ouvindo Elizabeth Diller e Louisa Sweetkin, que são as responsáveis pelo parque e citadas pelo Joshua e pelo Robert na apresentação deles. A Elizabeth é sócia fundadora do escritório Diller, Scofield & Renfrew e, além do High Line, é autora também dos projetos de remodelação do Lincoln Center em Nova York, do Museu da Imagem e do Som no Rio de Janeiro, em Copacabana, e do Instituto de Arte Contemporânea de Boston. Lisa é diretora do escritório Elisa, que é diretora do escritório James Corner Field Operations e coordenou projetos em Shenzhen, na China, em Hong Kong e em Londres. Com vocês, Elizabeth e Lisa, por favor.
So thank you very much for the invitation. We're going to, I think that Lisa and I and our teams have done countless quantity of presentations to our clients, to community boards, to government officials. We're constantly doing them, but we've actually never done one together to the public. So this is a first, and when we began to talk about how we would organize this, we realized there's just so much information, it would be very difficult to actually coordinate. Let's just improvise, more or less. And we said, well, let's just make it unscripted, and that's that title of the talk really touches on some of the real conditions of the High Line, how it got there in the first place. It was never scripted to be a park, and what Josh and Robert touched on at the end of their talk, that it's something that we put in place, but we could never control how it's used, and it's even better than we imagined with the uses we had in mind. So this is the image that the guys showed for what kind of inspired people and what allowed the public imagination to kind of understand and imagine what could happen here. And I have to say that I've often wondered whether Joel Sternfeld retouched the photograph because it is so gorgeous, but when we got there, it looked more like that.
So everyone had sort of fallen in love with this incredibly romantic view of this green ribbon in the sky, which it was, but the High Line was a very ephemeral landscape, and that it would have that moment, and then there were moments throughout the season where you would end up with something more like this.
And what we found there were needles. There were a lot of people shooting up there. It's inaccessible and is in fact illegal to be up there. We found condoms. We found all sorts of things that, you know, are really not so easily usable in our work forward.
And then you also had these, you know, a few people. There was someone who used to plant their Christmas tree out there every year, or you would see these boardwalks where people would sort of make these makeshift planks and go up there and use it as their own private backyard.
And I think that we, well, just a little bit of background, when Jim Corner and Lisa asked us to join their team at the very beginning of the project, we all went in with this kind of, well, with a sense of wonder about this weird, otherworldly place that the High Line is, and the kind of optimism about what it can be, and also with a kind of great spirit of interdisciplinarity that is very much marked by our individual studios transcending disciplinary boundaries already. And when we threw ourselves in there, we said, okay, let's forget about titles and our expertise. Let's come up with a great idea, and then we'll divide the work up later and really be able to do it relative to our expertise.
There was something about, you know, the High Line itself. I mean, even when we started the project, they didn't know what to classify it. They didn't know if it was a structure and it would go through the Department of Buildings, or if it was a park and it would go through the Department of Parks, or if it was an overpass and it would go through the Department of Transportation. So it already had this very ambiguous kind of sense of itself, and that was something that we actually thought was in some ways a positive thing that we could bring to the project.
And it was an intersection of urbanism, architecture, and landscape. It's rare that you ever get to practice a project on the scale of the High Line and to be able to imagine a mile and a half of territory to re-script, to rethink. So it was a great challenge, I think, for all of us. You know, it was also very hard to imagine how, from the ground, what this was. This is what you saw from the ground. It was kind of black, dark, and it went through blocks and it went across streets this way. So you know, and no one got to be up there unless you went there illegally. So it was very kind of interesting and intriguing to kind of imagine being up there in an official way.
And it was also something, I mean, it was built to actually disappear in the city. So it would have these moments where it crossed the street, but it was cutting through the mid-block or the backside of the city. So when you were up there, that opportunity to see the city in that way was very intriguing. But when you were from the street, it just sort of seemed like something that was actually a liability for the city.
And Robert and Josh already described a lot of the history, and we won't go through that. But there's something quite interesting to note that the High Line, when it was built 30 feet off the level of the ground, was built, first of all, it was built for moving trains. So it was really, really heavy structure. And rather than rolled steel, it was all plate steel with lots of rivets. Thousands.
Hand riveted.
Hand riveted, and it was, you know, actually something that we aesthetically thought that we would like to bring the public a little closer to that kind of construction because it was so unusual. And the whole issue of the controversy over saving it or losing it was all there, but there was some interesting moments in this area that was the meatpacking district that was also inundated with chop shops and car mechanics and open parking lots, and was really, really forgotten. All of a sudden, Dia Art Foundation found a home there. There's a major American contemporary museum and enabler of very large art. And as soon as they got there, things started to change, I think. Everyone started to think what that place could become. And this is very typical, I think, to many cities, most of all New York, that what happens in a revitalization of an area, first first the artists get there, then the galleries appear, then I think the condos start to come, and boutiques start to come, and restaurants and so forth, and then it all goes, and then the artists go someplace else. So that kind of weird cycle was just in its infancy at this point.
And I think something else that was interesting is that it started to become this hypothetical project in architecture and landscape architecture schools around the country. In fact, when I was a student doing my master's, it was my final thesis project. And at that time, I had never been up, and but it was still something that people were just sort of imagining, but it was always something that was seen as this will never happen.
Yeah, it was the most improbable thing in the world. What can you do there? It's like the first ideas competition. Everyone came up with kooky ideas of what to do with a stretch of New York. And then, of course, the Sternfeld photos really had a huge effect. In fact,
same picture of our mayor, Giuliani there.
Yeah, I mean, we all endured this moments that was really, it was post 9/11, and Giuliani had his heyday, and then it started to decline. And, I often think now, like, it would be fantastic to have a conference with Giuliani, because he was, he totally was swayed by the developers who said that their property values were devalued because of the High Line, and so he was really doing this because of that. And he could not have anticipated what could happen when you do the right thing, when you do a civic gesture, and when you give a gift to the city that's so generous.
And about this time was also when they began the West Chelsea rezoning effort, which Joshua and Robert spoke about. But one of the things, we were sort of just beginning to come on board when that zoning effort was ending. And one of the things that we had talked about was that the best part of zoning is that it actually deters bad things from happening and allows the High Line to breathe and get light and air. But we actually had many conversations with them about not making it too uniform, because part of the High Line's power was that as you crossed it, the buildings would react to it in very different ways. And that mix of being close to a building or far away was something that was special about the High Line.
I think we didn't speak very much about why the High Line went into disuse in around 1980. And it really had to do with the advent of the highway system and the rail distribution of goods to these warehouses and light manufacturing didn't make any sense by rail. So that's when it started to go into ruin, and then it just continued.
But there was something about that too, I think, that was powerful for us, because it almost had a lifespan as a working rail similar to its lifespan as an abandoned landscape. And so those two things of the sort of energy and the movement and the flows that happened of it being a rail line, and then the self-sown opportunistic landscape that came up, were actually very much inspired the design.
And so we actually love that, the ruin. I think that architects, designers have a love of things in decay, and I think that there was also something that was the sneaking in, the illicit part.
This is how I first came into the High Line myself, actually.
And in fact, because it was illegal, you could only get there by going through somebody's fire escape or over a roof, or just in some weird way. It was totally illegal. And I think when we first started to look at it, there were members of our teams that were arrested because it wasn't really clear that you could get up there. But this notion of the illicit was something that prompted the design. How could we bring all these people up there in an official way, but still have a feeling that it's something that is very special moment that you get to see, maybe not everyone sees it, and that it's it's the unofficial New York. I think that maybe is a way to characterize it.
Yeah, and there was this desire and this intention to actually keep the contrast from the city streets below. So this photograph here, that it's sort of the big public promenade street, but it has a different sort of slower quality that is more about the backside in a different part of New York. one of the first things that we did when we got the project was actually an ecological survey to see what was up there. And these diagrams are actually very much influenced the idea behind not only the planting, but in terms of all of the different features. And we were struck by this series of microenvironments or microclimates. And these were with, primarily weeds, although there were a few natives that were growing up there, but they were very localized and very specific. And the design itself has this choreography that actually is very localized and very specific.
And part of the perversion of what was there and what was so beautiful was that these seeds, basically, that were self-planted, came either they were airborne and native seeds, or they came off of train cars, and they were not native. And because of the different conditions along a mile and a half, some areas were drenched in sun, and some were kind of wet and exposed to wind, and some of them were sheltered with high buildings around. Different kinds of species took hold in different areas in these little microenvironments. And that's something that we couldn't predict for the future, whether the environment would stay the same, but we really riffed on that approach. And I think that, from a horticultural standpoint, and I think New Yorkers would consider weeds horticulture, and we were very enthralled by these grasses and weeds.
I think, this is an important slide for us. First of all, the fact that the notion of keep it was not a given, I think, when we came to the project. And the idea of just keeping it as not only the structure and thinking about the wild spirit of the landscape, but we kind of developed this mantra that was keep it simple, keep it wild, keep it quiet, keep it slow. And these were things that we went back to many times throughout the process. In many ways, we sort of talk about it as an act of restraint. There was a lot of pressure to do so many different things here, and that didn't mean they could be wonderful things, but we tried very much to think about what was right for this very particular place.
And I think that's why it struck a chord with Josh and Robert and others that were evaluating the competition. We were so in love with what the Highline actually was, and the ability to share that with lots of other people. It was really thinking hard about how design could come in here without overpowering what was there. How could it simply represent this to the public? And of course, we couldn't simply open it up because it would totally be trampled, and also the soil was toxic. Yeah. So things had to be done, but it was still very much about adaptive reuse and a certain kind of preservation, even of the ruin.
So I think, one of the things, they showed the 4 different entries, and we were one of them. And we took a very intentional position somewhere between this idea of total preservation. We didn't have this, in some ways it wasn't nostalgic, but there was something there that we wanted to capture, but it wasn't about just keeping it as a preserved, historical remnant. And then this idea of extreme transformation. And we really wanted to be sort of somewhere in between. And I think the project itself is such a, this kind of metaphor in terms of old and new and balancing all of these different things in the city.
And also, when we think of parks, we usually think of happy people. You go to the park to have fun and do recreation. But the thing that was so powerful about this potential park is that it was melancholic. It was also this kind of remnant of New York. It was kind of look backwards at the industrial history of New York. And it was a very, very important thing to still keep in play, because it's so easy for this kind of site to get sanitized and lose the beauty and the kind of melancholia that's already there. So I think that we gave ourselves the hardest problem, and I think this is every one of the architects that participated in this had to figure this problem out. How do you bring all these people up there and also preserve a space for plants? And how do you do it in a different way that doesn't simply divide the space that way? Because in many areas, it's only 22 feet wide. So very, very narrow. How could you have a stream of the public moving back and forth and still keep the wildness and the plant life? And I think we were very much influenced by the way that the natural cycles of man-made stuff on nature, then in decay, where nature takes over, and then culture reclaims it, and then nature takes over again. So these kinds of cycles happen all the time. The natural cycles are ferocious, they're very strong, and they are very present unless we maintain them very, very strongly.
And there was something about that existing surface where you couldn't tell anymore in terms of what was hard, what was soft, what was track, what was this. And so that sort of led us into the idea of the development of a new type of surface, which we at that time called agritecture, and it still applies. Mm-hmm. But the idea was to have something that was consistent, that was clear as this is the High Line, it is this sort of ribbon that runs through 3 different distinct neighborhoods in Manhattan, and we wanted it to hold its sort of identity, but it allowed for this variety and different types of things to come up and happen, and it would morph and adapt and change.
So in a sense, what we imagined was if you took the entire surface and digitized it, I think that's the way we originally talked about it, that it's just pieces of space, and it could either go hard or it could go soft. And then it could be recombined in different ways, in different percentages. So there could be 100% green material, green landscape. There could be 100% hardscape, and any percentage or gradient in between.
And it was edge to edge, which I think is important. So it took over the entire space instead of having a sort of typical relationship where it's to the side. And that also led us to think about the kind of overall framework and planning in a very different way. Instead of kind of approaching this as something that was this goes here, and this goes here, and this goes here, we had a much kind of more flexible notion about different areas in terms of where it would be harder or where it would be softer. For example, in the meatpacking district, where it was a little bit wider, where it had the shelter of buildings that it went through, it could be harder to allow for programs. Where it went through the residential area of West Chelsea, where it was narrower, it would actually be softer relating to the adjacent residential units.
And you could also see in the bottom image, and we'll go into it more deeply, that the actual design of the paving allows the green material to emerge, a little bit like the concrete and the grass, that it's not just an area of paved and green, but a kind of integration and a combing together in a way that allows plants to grow through cracks.
And then this was the sort of application of that to show the different variety that was possible.
And some of the original features that we imagined, which in a certain sense we're happy we didn't really go, we didn't get
there
into
were provocations.
There were provocations. There were also, I remember that there were cost issues, and but it was, I think, for all of us involved in design, there was like a very strong introspection about how much design is enough and how much is too little, and how to do that balance. And clearly, if you look at the way the High Line is designed, you will see design everywhere. But the feel was that you didn't really see architecture. You really didn't see that much design. But in order to pull that off, it took a lot of energy.
And one of the other things that's come up in terms of the official programming of the space and also the sort of unofficial programming of the space was that very early on we wanted to be very different than the adjacent Hudson River Park, which was really about fast speeds, getting biking, recreation, and that this was something different and something slower, changing the pace and having types of programs that you wouldn't find in its next door park.
Where there are wheels and roller blades and runners and so forth, that slowness was a virtue here.
And this was the initial framework plan, which is interesting to look at now to see if it still sort of holds true. But there was a few initial ideas here. One was about the sort of regularity or irregularity of access points to the High Line. I think originally there was an idea or a notion that you should connect wherever possible, and we actually wanted to make it, of course, accessible, but to not have them everywhere, that again, it be different than a street below, that it sort of have a sense of approaching it and walking and finding it and then finding a place to come down. And then there were a number of places that were highlighted for its opportunity. It got a little bit bigger, it went through a building to sort of have different types of both landscape features and more architectural features.
And some of these were definitely intuitions on our part that have to do with how to enter the High Line, how often, whether fast or slow. That was, entries were designed by durations as opposed to things, names. And just to kind of underscore how everything here was done for the first time, like this notion of how long between entrances, what does security mean here on the High Line? It's not like being on the street. You're up 30 feet in the air, and if you have to go 3 blocks, if you have a problem or an emergency, you have to walk. So it's so issues of security, issues of trash removal, all the things that Robert and Josh mentioned were being done here for the first time. And New York is fairly conservative. Its parks have certain kind of, it's a system with regulation, everything. And we had to push through all of that to really create almost a new palette, a new sets of rules that applied only to the High Line.
So we wanted to just quickly take you through some of the layers of the park, because one of the things about it that a lot of people don't realize, or maybe they do, but it just gets lost, is that it's a very thin profile. In terms of the bottom of the concrete deck to the top of where you could actually do paving, planting, seating, et cetera, is about 18 to 24 inches. And one of the best compliments that I've probably gotten when I've been up there is that, oh, I thought this was already there. But in fact, the entire structure had to be, this is the demolition of the top side, it had to be re-waterproofed. We had to intimately tag every single rail track and put them back in their original locations. There was concrete and steel restoration. These were in localized places. It wasn't everywhere. There was moments where you did have, this was an area where they used to wash down the trains, so you actually had to remove the whole deck and repair it. That's actually the Standard Hotel going up there. There was lead paint, so it had to be painted, and this was a mock-up that we had to do with the commissioners all came down to sort of choose their color. It ended up being the green-black, second from the left. And then there was a whole new drainage system in order to, the drainage was designed with the paving so that we could actually have the high points underneath the path surfaces, and the water would actually be filtered into the planted surfaces. And so here you can kind of see the buildup. So this is edge to edge. You started to have this open joint paving system where the water could flow through, and it would then move down into the adjacent planted beds. And the paving was, it seems like it was something that was part of the competition, but it was a sort of endless round of designs. These are some of the models that we did. And the idea still was this modular system, and it was a number of different plank types, but there was primarily both a straight plank and then this sort of signature tapered plank that allows for that blended edge and allows for the water to flow into the planting beds. And then those different units would sort of come together, and depending on how you arrange them, you would get these very different conditions. And the importance of that being this integrated system, this is them actually installing it, so that things could actually fit right inside. So this image shows how those tapers were also designed to fit in both plants and the existing rail tracks. And then it came together to form this surface and all of these different units. It's a sort of very, in some ways, a very simple idea, but all of that underground work and coordinating with utilities and the rest of it was very complex, what you're sort of not seeing underneath the ground.
Yeah, and there were issues about how much soil medium had to be there, how large trees could we have, and so forth. So some of the kind of the absolutes and the givens were had a lot to do with what we decided ultimately would work well in perpetuity. And everything came out of this system. There were also there were many different plank types. There were curb edges. Of course, we didn't want people just walking into the grasses. There were special bench strategies. The important thing was that there was a kind of unified design strategy which touched everything, and we tried very hard to have as little extra material or new device as possible. So this
and everything was sort of, everything was very long and very thin, like the High Line itself. So a normal bench in New York City would be 1.5 times this scale, but everything got this kind of slenderized quality.
And in the grain of movement. So you could see the benches are a combination of concrete, and this is the installation, and wood with a bit of steel helping out there. And there are multiple different bench types, and the lighting was also integrated.
And configuration, so you could have moments where you could sort of be very intimate, and then moments like this where they would be grouped together for more gatherings.
Right, and that was very much to do with where we were at the time. So once we had the system, we kind of played it out relative to the width and to the site-specific conditions. Some places had backs. Yeah, 10 minutes, okay. We're gonna go fast. We also interpreted the industrial past and into a culture of leisure into the future. So the industrial tracks or a kind of moment where we could put lounge chairs together and perhaps move those lounge chairs, and then evolving into certain stationary seating as well.
And in the planting layers, I'm going to go very fast through this, but one of the first questions was this idea of what will grow there. With Friends of the High Line, there was actually an organized seed collecting event where these seeds are actually at the Native Plant Center in the Greenbelt. There was this notion of keep it wild, and what did that mean? There was an idea of having a kind of native grassland with a series of punctuations that were both woodland and perennials. And this is just a kind of insert of the planting, and it's a highly coordinated design, and in fact, its power, I think, is that every time you go up there, this is taken from a similar place. Throughout the year, it changes, and it's not just seasonal, it actually can change even week to week. So it brings people back. This is, again, just showing that idea of the very narrow depth and how it was planted. These are individual 4-inch pots, if you can see, in terms of how it was actually planted on the site, all of the engineered soil being brought into the site. And in some ways, the planting has actually become a great feature of the park. It's something that now, I mean, they have a plant of the week that sort of goes up. People are always asking questions, and I think that this contrast between, you know, the warehouse and then this sort of rich series of plants where you sort of see the tracks, and in certain seasons they're revealed, and in other seasons they're covered, and there's this kind of over 220 species up there. So that's very rare in the city. I mean, usually parks have your sort of typical trees and then turf, and the idea of actually having all of this different variety in a park, in a New York City park, was very rare. I've seen people up there taking pictures of themselves with plants.
And again, with the system, we decided that we really didn't want to articulate lighting features. So everything that lit the High Line, because it would be open into the evening, would be below the level of the sides. And so that was about 3.5 feet or so, 4 feet. And the lighting is basically invisible, LED strips inside of the guardrails, and it has a very nice effect. There's also lighting built into the benches and throughout, but you don't really see the lights. You just see the effect of the lights and just some night views. Of course, there's
I've heard
some
people say it's way too romantic for New York when you're up there at night. It's a very different mood.
And there are spots in which we really kind of push something that really didn't feel like it belonged. How could we take like the Chelsea Market, which is this big tunnel, and really change the atmosphere of it? And this is lit with fluorescent lights with blue gels, and the atmosphere is entirely artificial and weird. And 10th Avenue overlook, and this is to the north. This is the second section that's very narrow, and again, that same section. It's all the things that are unexpected that come together there. That's what makes it so interesting and weird. And I mentioned that how you get there, the arrival points are different durations. Sometimes it's very quick via elevator, sometimes it's slow. This is at the entrance off of Gansevoort, and you see the stair that rises rather slowly and up through the 6 feet of steel, and you have that sense of the rivets and really play up that notion of moving through the steel work.
And I think we still, we wanted to have a similar effect that we had when we arrived there, that you sort of have come into this other world or this other place. So the idea that you had the hanging vines and the trees, and you're kind of seeing this kind of sky and garden up above as you approach from the frenetic pace of the city below.
And we're just gonna zap through some...
We're gonna take you on a walk since you can't go right now, but you can sort of see all of the different features along the way. So there is, again, this idea of this sort of consistency of the line itself, but with a number of punctuations that react to its adjacencies. This is one of the closest moments to the river, so we thought about how to bring water up to the High Line, how water would reveal itself on the High Line.
And also great exposure to the south and west, so great places to watch the sunset, and thus the lounge chairs are there, for sunning. These are some of the bridges and spurs. Some are inaccessible. This is one particular spur over 10th Avenue, which was simply made into a kind of audience space, and the steel was replaced with glass to overlook the traffic, on 10th Avenue traffic.
And it gave the High Line a presence from the street because it never really had one before. And so the idea of these very strategic insertions where you could actually, the High Line could reveal itself below, and then below could sort of look back at the High Line itself.
And the High Line is a great place to witness the city in a new way. So the things that are there normally, all of a sudden, are unfamiliar. And all the blank walls and all the things that you're not meant to see are all of a sudden there. Even the car lots seem interesting all of a sudden. So you're looking at New York from 30 feet. You don't have to stop for traffic lights like you do when you're walking down the block. And you get to see a kind of weird part of New York that was really unintended.
And there's also something, promenading in parks used to actually be a very popular activity, and then it kind of died out. And this has brought back that notion of actually doing the walk. Many people who come up to the High Line, of course, they have their special places where they stay or they linger, but they actually like to walk the entire length of the line.
And there are some areas that are really, really green, and you really have
This
to kind
is
of...
the transition between the meatpacking district and the neighborhood.
Whoops, I went back. Okay. And there are some moments where also the landscape is shifting so quickly that here there was a kind of mechanics chop shop thing that tomorrow will be a condo. And we can't really keep track of the speed of change here. Something stopped. Okay. And other areas with overlooks and benches where you can just get off the beaten track and really have a moment, a quiet moment, or places for people watching by consent, I think, from both. This is an area that goes over 30th Street where there's no paving there, so you could see right down through the structure to the traffic below. And here we are 2/3 of the way there. This is after Section 2 was built. And now we wanted to, we have a couple of more sections. We're going to go very quickly. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this was more of a teaser, which you already sort of got. But when we're now under construction for the 3rd phase of the High Line, and I think when we first came to this, we thought, okay, we've done the High Line 1, High Line 2. It should be easier, right? But we got to this phase, and we called it sort of High Line 3.0, and there was this idea that it was something completely different from what we had done before. Not only is there a change of orientation where you're sort of, the High Line is now running east-west from the city to the river instead of north-south, but there was this new development which Robert and Joshua talked about, the rail yards, which was a completely different context. There was nothing there to react to for us, and it will be something that is totally different.
So it's the last undeveloped tract in Manhattan, huge, where the rail yards are. So their platform will be built over the rail yards, and 13 million square feet of mixed-use space, office space, and retail and commercial space will be built, as well as residential.
It's also the moment where the High Line gets the closest to the river, which is a very the river has a presence in this section like it doesn't in other sections, but its adjacencies to this development, I think it's in the next slide where you can sort of see that the High Line could almost disappear. There's our little High Line. You can see it on the bottom.
So this is a radical change of context, and that's why we call the Brave New World, where how could we take advantage of actually the size difference and produce a kind of radical shift. Okay, well, of course, the city and the river. One of the features, and we're not going to show you all of them, just a little sprinkling, is the ability to actually look from the High Line on some of those lounge chairs up the face of a commercial building as a new horizon. So we're kind of embracing this newness and trying to see it through the strange eye of the High Line.
We couldn't compete with it, so there was this kind of opportunity to begin to think about how the High Line would actually mutate or change in relationship to this new development. So one of the most popular features on the High Line is the sort of iconic peel-up bench. And in this 3rd section, we're actually looking at a way that it's recognizable as the High Line, but it just slightly shifts and changes and becomes something else.
So as 3.0 evolves any technology, everything is just a little bit twisted and different.
So nowhere else on the High Line are you actually allowed to walk on the rails or in the rail tracks. So here, again, you have a different relationship to the tracks themselves, and you are wandering within them. It also nicely acts as another pathway to sort of help with all the people who are going to be here.
And an opportunity, actually, there was a lot of discussion about where the kids go, where's the kids' playground. We always resisted it because kids love the High Line. It doesn't matter whether there's a playground there. But this one gesture in this last section basically strips the High Line and allows the kids to actually play within the beams, the structural beams, which are surfaced in rubber, so they're very safe. And there are some nice little, very quiet features there. for kids.
And then finally, the interim walkway, which Robert referred to. And, you know, this is a very special and it's a moment in time that is actually very special, where I think people are going to be able to see, you know, what it was and then what it can be. And it was very important to sort of allow this link to happen. And because the development there isn't happening till later, we didn't want to just truncate the High Line at the end. We wanted people to go all the way down around the rail yards, experience the river, and then it goes down to grade for its only moment where it actually touches the street.
And Josh and Robert actually hit on this unexpected that we also wanted to discuss. And you know, clearly there are moments that are planned and that are you know, already envisioned through the design, where performances can happen, and areas that are not yet in construction that are taken over with the High Line for art or for recreation. This is a skate rink, temporary skate rink, and beer garden on grade. And then, like, this was actually just when the High Line opened, this was the first wedding. It was anticipated and a kind of moment of celebration, and performances happening on and off the High Line. Lots of impromptu things that are not planned, sometimes not so great.
Sometimes great.
Sometimes great, sometimes terrific. Watching the stars, things that we could never imagine that people would go on the High Line to do. Robert spoke about this, and this is one of many conditions where we're really amused by this. The Standard Hotel, which was built over the High Line, one of the very few places where the zoning allowed a structure to cross the High Line, became a kind of place for exhibitionism, and it was pretty funny. We didn't really know whether the hotelier set this up, but there was a kind of fantastic back and forth that happened for a long time.
Another dialogue with the High Line.
Yeah. And then, of course, everyone's capitalizing on the High Line. There are all sorts of High Line motifs. These are some of the products. There was this great competition for Miss Meatpacking District, which we beat out Alexander McQueen with this dress. And how it's been absorbed in popular culture. This is an establishing shot for Family Guy, a very popular cartoon. This is a popular comedy series. This is a Marvel Comics. And it appears everywhere. It's very hard to just even collect these things. This is really incredible. This is like the first High Line perfume, and this is not something that the Friends of the High Line are marketing, but it's advertised as the world's first railroad fragrance. The scent of wildflowers, green grasses, and urban renewal. And of course, the buildup of the High Line, which we've seen a little bit more. It's become such an important place, and almost to a point where we wonder, as the architects and designers of the High Line, we had to start protecting it from all the rest of the architecture that was starting to grow around it. How do we keep that kind of wonder that was there without overloading it? And there are High Lines that are appearing all over the world. This project has gone viral, and these High Lines are proliferating in different parts of the world, and trying to trigger what's now called the High Line effect. It kind of shows a growing rejection of tabula rasa planning, and really putting attention into existing infrastructures that could be repurposed if there's a good idea, and if there's a good connection and relationship with the government. Just a thought, we've often wondered why the High Line is so popular in New York. I mean, you cannot do anything on the High Line. You cannot rollerblade, you cannot bring your bike, you can't bring your dog. You really can't do anything but sit and stroll. And this is kind of the epitome of doing nothing, where people decide to sit here and watch traffic on 10th Avenue.
Mesmerized by traffic.
And we realize it's a kind of new zen, because we're all so obsessed with having productive time, and if we're not working, we're always on our devices, or we're burning calories. But this is a new phenomenon, I think, that's urban, the kind of appeal of really doing nothing. And I think we could just let this play while we maybe assemble to have our discussion. So I think, and this is going to give you the experience. It goes all the way from Gansevoort to 30th Street. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bom, obrigado, Elizabeth, obrigado, Lisa. Vou pedir que continuem no palco e vou chamar agora também o Joshua e o Robert para se juntarem. E vou apresentar o Washington Fajardo e o Raul Lores, que vão participar do debate. O Washington Fajardo é o presidente do Instituto Rio Patrimônio da Humanidade, da Prefeitura do Rio de Janeiro e assessor especial do prefeito para assuntos urbanos. É o responsável pela operação urbana do Porto Maravilha. Washington Fajardo. Raul Lores é o correspondente da Folha de São Paulo em Washington e bolsista da Fundação Eisenhower Fellowship em Estudos de Urbanismo. Raul, por favor, venha ao palco. Lembro à plateia que as perguntas devem ser encaminhadas por escrito e nós temos aqui as pessoas que vão recolhê-las e encaminhá-las aqui para o debate. Tá? Obrigado.
Bom dia, muito obrigado ao Arquifuturo, a Marisel Tomás pelo convite. Respondendo a Duda, o Rio de Janeiro com chuva é maravilhoso do mesmo jeito. Então, obrigado pelo convite. 2 pedidos, eu acho que todo público que está aqui é privilegiado, de alguma maneira, de conhecer um caso tão bem-sucedido de transformação urbana. Então, como a gente vive hoje em dia no Facebook, no Twitter, às vezes colocando assim, fotos e historinhas que não são tão interessantes, ia pedir se a gente poderia compartilhar no Twitter e no Facebook o que a gente está assistindo, ouvindo, links, fotos, as histórias do Highline, porque mais do que um parque elevado em Nova York, é um caso onde, ou seja, moradores conseguiram, de fato, derrotar aí um prefeito tão poderoso e interesses imobiliários por uma causa aí pública. Acho bastante interessante esse compartilhamento. E o livro que vai ser lançado amanhã pela BEI, que conta a história do Highline, também pode ser lido quase como um manual passo a passo de como conseguir apoio, financiamento e ganhar uma batalha política numa cidade com interesses aí literalmente gigantescos. Primeira pergunta que ia fazer para o Robert e para o Joshua. Hoje em dia eles devem receber prefeitos de todo o mundo que vão a Nova York, que se encantam com o Highline e que querem fazer um cut and paste e literalmente copiar o Highline para suas cidades. Se vocês podiam nos contar em que casos essa cópia é bem sucedida, E em que casos, quando vocês veem, vocês falam, não é exatamente a melhor solução simplesmente colocar um parque em qualquer estrutura elevada?
Yeah, I mean, we get calls almost at least once a week, you know, asking us for help or for advice. And I think the projects that are most interesting are the ones that say we don't want it to be just like the High Line. I think when someone says, oh, we want to build you know, an exact replica of the High Line, you know, I think that's not interesting and usually doesn't prove to be successful. It's projects that maybe are inspired by it or inspired that something so unlikely can happen, but that take the context of their own neighborhood or their own city and what the people in that community really want. Those are the ones that are more interesting and tend to be more successful.
And just to add to that, I think that there are a number of things that make the High Line successful that are very particular to its structure, the way that it interacts with the city blocks of New York City, its narrowness, and also the kind of city that New York is, its density, where we are dependent on private funding for most of its operations. So we have a very philanthropic community in New York City that allows us to do that. Not all cities have that kind of culture. So it's important to remember what are the things that are unique to the city in which a project finds itself, and that those things are taken into consideration.
No livro, há várias passagens que vocês narram como vocês conseguiram estimular essa cultura de doações, ou seja, durante muito tempo era literalmente os dois e a organização contra a prefeitura e contra os empreendedores imobiliários. Vocês contam que levaram do Edward Norton ao Brad Pitt para conhecer o High Line, que da Martha Stewart ao Anderson Cooper fizeram aí jantares e eventos para arrecadar fundos. Vocês ocuparam a Grand Central e o MoMA para mostrar o resultado dos concursos. Que vocês explicassem um pouco como foi esse primeiro approach quando vocês ainda não tinham essa popularidade.
I think it's a really interesting question, and I think a very important one for us that a number of lessons can be taken from. The fact that we had to challenge the city very early on through a lawsuit meant that we had to raise monies to hire good lawyers to do that. And I think a lot of young organizations are very wary of fundraising and look at raising money as the worst part of what they have to do and avoid it. And I think what we learned was that by embracing that need very early and addressing it very early, you strengthen your organization at a very early phase. In order to raise money successfully, you have to have a good database, you have to have good systems, you have to have good communication systems. All of these things serve to build your organization in other ways. And the other thing that I think is underappreciated sometimes is that fundraising for a project like this is a kind of community building, the same way that other kinds of organizing are. And when you go out to a group of people and ask them to financially support the work that you're doing, these people become your most committed, your most dedicated group of community members. And we really advance the project by talking to our donors as people who were part of this inner circle, this group of people who are changing the face of New York City. And it was a very powerful thing and a way that people found that they could relate to the project and be active participants in the project.
I'd like to just want to add to that a little bit. There's something about American arts culture that's because there's so little state support for anything. We lost a lot of it in the Reagan era. That American organizations, more cultural organizations, have learned to be really scrappy, and a small arts group and so forth. And I think it's kind of a nature in the States that if you want to do something, you have to kind of fight for it and figure out how to do it. I mean, this particular project is unprecedented, so the fundraising for that is unusual because the philanthropic group that would normally give to the arts wouldn't really naturally come to support a park. So I think that Josh and Robert imagined a new philanthropic group, you know, and went to a much younger group of people that potentially could give, that were not the same old folks that give to the opera and the ballet and the museum. Those are interesting.
Podiam nos contar algum caso aí particular de coleta aí de fundos que foi particularmente bem sucedido? Alguma ideia nova aí do Friends of Highlining, como atrair mais doações ou como aumentar aí o alcance da campanha?
Yeah, well, we would use the designers. Was a great way. So when we did that ideas competition, we did a benefit around that. So, you know, we had an event at Grand Central where so you could be the first ones to see these designs. When, you know, the design team came up with their designs, we did an event around their designs. So, you know, and we would use their images, their early images, you know, on our invitations as a way to showcase design. It's similar, I guess it's more, rather than what parks, we modeled ourselves in some ways out of cultural institutions or art museums, the same way that an art museum would use a new building by, you know, famous designers. We would use that as a way as a fundraising tool.
And there's also a lot of cultural organizations, museums have something called membership, where you become a member of the museum, and it conveys a very particular and tangible benefit, free admission to a museum where you're otherwise charged for it. We have a membership program as well, but the park is free, so you can't offer that benefit as the benefit of membership. So we redefined the way that membership operated, where membership was really about a sense of feeling, a sense of belonging, a sense of being part of a group of people who were affecting an incredible change on New York City and becoming, that you were with Liz, you were with Joel Sternfeld, you were with Ed Norton, you were part of this very special group of people, and making people feel involved in that way.
O sucesso do Highline já aconteceu na primeira fase. Já em 2009, o número de visitantes era muito maior do que esperado. Queria perguntar para a Liz e para a Alissa como isso impactou o design. Ou seja, uma coisa é desenhar um parque para 300 mil pessoas, outra é como organizar 2 milhões, 3 milhões, 4 milhões. Ou seja, como impactou o sucesso e o que vocês mudaram ou adaptaram depois desse sucesso inicial?
Okay. I mean, I think people ask us a lot, would you have designed it differently if you would have known that it was going to be so popular? And I mean, for me personally, I feel like, you know, you could have paved it edge to edge and gotten a lot more people up there, but that doesn't mean that it would have been the same experience. So the fact that it actually is almost self-regulating because it has this narrow width and you can go off and on it at different moments. And I think people go up there for that environment that we created, and that ratio was very important to that. Of course, you know, there are a few moments, and because it's a modular system, there's a couple moments, for example, where people would queue for the bathrooms where we've now paved it to give a little more here or there. But I think that the whole idea of having it actually be a garden in many ways is part of its appeal, and I would not have changed that knowing what, you know, we know now.
And also the kind of peculiar fate, you know, happened where when it became really popular, it was actually, we were doing the second section, which is the most narrow. I mean, really, really narrow. So it went in reverse. But we couldn't have planned for it, you know, any differently. I think that the self-sorting issue is pretty interesting. A lot of people have complained that Highline is just it's too popular. It's eating itself up. And the way I see that New York is kind of regulating, New Yorkers are regulating the use, is that you see different people at different times of day. So in the morning, you'll see a lot of people going to work, on their way to work, or you'll see, in the middle of the day, you'll see nannies or retired people, and then when people are coming back from work, 5 and 6 o'clock, you see a lot of business people, and then in the evening you see people just promenading, and there's a whole big gay crowd that comes at night, and people are cruising and so forth. There's this kind of weird way that it sorts through these little subcultures and populations. And of course, New Yorkers don't really love to go there on weekends. We like to go there on weekdays.
Rainy days are my favorite now.
Raul, se você me permite uma pergunta, eu gostaria de saber como funcionou e como se deu durante o período de concepção e também depois durante o período de projeto e de obras, a relação com os entes de patrimônio cultural da cidade de Nova York. Se eles foram, se houve um diálogo prévio, se eles tiveram envolvimento e depois também durante o projeto, eu vi, por exemplo, a questão ali das cores, eu queria saber como é que foi essa experiência no início e depois também durante o projeto e obras com os órgãos de patrimônio cultural da cidade.
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, in the beginning, our first goal was just not to build a park, but was to stop it from being demolished. And one of the ways we looked at that was having it declared a landmark, or using. But people were not interested. I mean, people didn't think of it as a traditionally beautiful structure. The things that traditionally go through landmarks, and that city process is so controlled by politics. We were shut out of any opportunity of saving it through landmarks. Once we had that opportunity, we didn't want to make it a landmark because then it makes it too difficult, we felt, to actually make something really innovative. Our fear was that if we made it a landmark, once we had political support, then we would never have been able to build this design that we had now. It would have had to have been, preserved sort of exactly back in time. And then I'll let the designers talk about sort of the process of actually when we did go through it.
Sure, I mean, I can't even tell you the number of agencies probably involved throughout the life of the project. I mean, we basically lived at City Hall for the first few years, meeting with all of the different departments of transportation, of counterterrorism, of parks, everyone. So I think because it was unprecedented and people didn't know how to classify it or react to it or what rules applied, the beginning of the project was actually very much about figuring out how we were gonna sort of file it even in the city, and then what codes would apply to it that we would have to adhere to. And we did meet with the historic preservation group, and I mean, their biggest comment was actually the preservation of the rail tracks themselves, which was something that we had already integrated into the design. But there was a number of every different design stage had to go through an approval stage associated with it by all the different entities. And we had a matrix that was probably like 30 pages long of just the different people that had to sign off on it.
I think it's an interesting problem of what culture chooses to think is worthy of preservation. That whole question of adaptive reuse, and to come from a moment where it was going into demolition, nobody was crying, everybody was kind of happy that it was going to demolition, to a point where people now look at it as a kind of treasure, has to do with the way that it was transformed. I'm not sure there is that much, it was built in 2930, so it's not that old. And there are some details that are very particular, and we were very careful to work around those details and not, and show them off, like the rivets and the guardrails and so forth. So we wanted to show some things off. But at the same time, in infrastructure kind of works into that category of preservation. There's not a lot of brickwork, like in the Promenade Plantée, you have the arches that are really quite architectural and so forth. Here, it was just the steel, the exposed steel. And so kind of we did fit in this kind of weird place. It was industrial and it wasn't sentimental.
And I'll just throw one last thing in there, is historic preservation, particularly in New York, often ends up of a war of historic preservation against real estate development or economic development. And because I think if we'd taken a really pure historic preservation line and opposed all real estate development around the High Line, which is something that a lot of historic preservation groups in New York will do, I think we would have had a much, much harder time. A lot of the success of the project came from looking at the preservation of a historic project as something that conveys economic benefits and is part of an economic development effort.
Outra pergunta para o Robert e para o Josh. No livro há várias passagens que vocês contam a participação do Barry Diller e da Diane von Furstenberg em ajudar, não só o fundraising, mas de alguma maneira quase explicar como envolver outros empresários na doação, na campanha. Vocês podiam contar um pouquinho desses encontros que vocês tiveram?
Yeah, well, when we first started it, the people that are traditionally involved in the community politics tend to be older, and the people that were involved, what we have what's called community boards, which is sort of the base level of political community activism. And they were not interested in the High Line. It took us, I think, 4 or 5 years to get them to support us. The head of preservation and planning, the head of the committee in preservation and planning, the community board, he voted for demolition of the High Line. So we had to look for this new support, and it was really these people that had come to the neighborhood, these newer, Barry Diller and Diane von Furstenberg sort of at the top of that pyramid, but there were a lot of just young entrepreneurs that had been attracted by cheap rent. And so whenever we were on the agenda of the community board, the average age would drop by a few decades. But that I think it was people that saw the neighborhood through a new light and sort of saw the beauty, and they were attracted to not just the cheap rents, but the warehouses, this sort of industrial feeling, and that they view that as a different kind of historic preservation. At the same time we were doing the High Line, there was an area called the Meatpacking, which is at the base of the High Line, and it actually went through and became a historic district, and it was one of the first times an area of sort of non-traditional beauty of warehouses had gotten a historic designation.
And I think there are a couple of other things at play as well. A lot of preservation and parks groups in New York City at the time that we were starting felt very staid and quiet and conservative, and when you went to their events, they weren't necessarily the most lively and fun and glamorous events. And I think we, from the very beginning, thought of our work on the High Line as something that we wanted to be fun and irreverent and stylish and engaging for a creative group of New Yorkers, people from the design community, people from fashion, people from architecture. And so that became part of our identity very, very early on, and I think was a large part of the success of our early work, was defining it in that way.
Há 3 perguntas aqui. Eu vou começar já as perguntas da plateia, porque o risco de ter um jornalista como moderador é fazer perguntas sem parar até a noite. Tem 3 perguntas para o Washington, perguntando se em algum momento foi especulado, pensado em manter a perimetral e transformá-la num High Line.
Bem, vamos lá, eu estava aqui só aguardando essa pergunta. Eu acho que o que a gente tem de muito interessante aqui no caso do High Line, para a gente aqui no Rio, eu acho que até para as experiências brasileiras, é a gente poder observar um processo de apoderamento da sociedade civil, inclusive, principalmente do setor privado. Depois é uma pergunta que eu quero fazer para eles com relação à mudança do zoning da área. Na verdade, é um slide que ele mostrou ali, mas é muito importante para mostrar a base realística por trás desse sonho. Então, acho que o que é bem interessante no caso deles é esse sonho, mas que tem uma base de realidade muito bem organizada por detrás, e aonde o zoning me parece que teve um papel fundamental. Eu acho que, do mesmo modo, quando a gente fala da perimetral, a base da operação e a base da transformação da região do Porto passa pelo resgate da Rodrigues Alves e desse patrimônio que existe ali e que é hoje oprimido pela presença dessa estrutura. A perimetral, acho que ela tem significativas diferenças de escala, de detalhes. O High Line ele tem uma estrutura metálica onde você pode observar de um certo modo um desenho, uma atuação da mão humana em cima dessa construção. No caso da perimetral, nós temos um outro tipo de escala, um outro tipo de tratamento. Então, a resposta é obviamente, High Line já estava em vias, né, de acontecer em 2009. Eu tive no High Line em 2009 e eu estava saindo de Nova York na véspera da inauguração, e eu tentei pular a grade para subir lá, e um policial me abordou. Eu falei, acho melhor eu não tentar nada ilegal aqui, ainda mais como turista, e tive depois a oportunidade de voltar no mesmo ano e ver, de fato, o sucesso. Então, obviamente, o Highline já era, mesmo ainda da inauguração, ele já era um case interessante de aproveitamento, de transformação de infraestrutura. Então, ele era bastante conhecido pela administração da prefeitura. Agora, de fato, eu acho que não é replicável para o nosso caso da perimetral. Perimetral é uma via ainda viva do ponto de vista arterial, por exemplo. Ela ainda funciona como uma via expressa. Os carros lá ainda passam. A gente não está falando de uma infraestrutura que estava ociosa. E, além desse aspecto, que eu acho que é o aspecto de identificação de um valor histórico e cultural, que a gente pode observar na qualidade do tratamento construtivo do Highline, que eu acho que a gente não identifica aqui na perimetral. Eu acredito que a cidade, aqui no Rio, a gente vai se beneficiar muito com a retirada, de fato, com a demolição da perimetral, podendo, inclusive, resgatar a Rodrigues Alves da Praça Mauá até praticamente o seu meio como uma via, uma via peatonal, essencialmente, e também com a presença do VLT, né, do tram, que vai passar a criar um novo tipo de mobilidade. Então, eu acho que a gente tem contextos distintos. Entretanto, eu acho que é sempre interessante ficar atento para experiências como essas e também poder, aí do ponto de vista de poder público, ficar com os ouvidos bem abertos para identificar esses anseios comunitários. Eu acho que na cidade nós encontramos experiências parecidas e, só para citar aqui um case, o caso do Cine Vaz Lobo, por exemplo, que seria demolido para a abertura da Transcarioca, lá em Vaz Lobo, e nós, no patrimônio, identificamos um movimento comunitário de defesa daquele patrimônio. Por isso que eu fiz a pergunta sobre o tombamento, ou o pedido de tombamento. Nós, no patrimônio, procuramos mostrar para outros órgãos da prefeitura como era importante a manutenção daquele edifício sem, entretanto, utilizar o instrumento do tombamento. Eu acho que esse é um ponto que eu acho que é muito interessante no Highline, de podermos avaliar bem a presença e a utilização do instrumento do tombamento. Eu acho que, na verdade, o tombamento ele deve coroar um processo de preservação, mas ele é, na verdade, mais uma manifestação do Estado. Será que essa manifestação do Estado de preservação ela é, de fato, efetiva? Então, no caso do Vaz Lobo, nós, no Patrimônio Cultural, fizemos uma série de contas de engenharia, provando para o setor de engenharia da prefeitura que era possível fazer uma pequena mudança de traçado, demolindo menos imóveis e mantendo o Cine Vaz Lobo como um espaço cívico. Ou seja, não utilizamos do nosso instrumento natural, que é o do tombamento. Eu acho que esse tipo de utilização ou outras estratégias de preservação que não necessariamente reproduzem a presença, mais uma vez, do Estado com seus instrumentos, eu acho que é a grande lição que a gente pode tirar aqui do Highline. Então, eu acho que, de fato, a perimetral ela deve ser demolida e acho que a gente tem um ganho significativo para o Porto. Isso não significa que a gente não possa aprender muito com o caso do Highline.
Tem duas perguntas parecidas para Liz Diller sobre o que foi feito com a área embaixo do Highline. Se ela continua claustrofóbica, escura, insegura e deteriorada, pergunta o Manuel Ribeiro. E o Lucas Franco também pergunta sobre, que ele sentiu falta de informações sobre o que aconteceu na parte embaixo da estrutura.
Well, I could start responding to that, and maybe you guys can also help there. A lot of the sites just underneath the Highline are actually not possessed by the Highline. There are different property owners all throughout, and I think there have been some efforts to actually make a community of those property owners to do something that's responsive, and I'm not sure that anything has really congealed. But maybe you can discuss it.
Yeah, so the case where the railroad only owned the structure and the easement right of 30 feet above the Highline. So there were 27 different property owners that owned property underneath it. And some are still parking lots, some of them are being developed. One of the hard parts is the High Line makes it so it's hard to have a really open space. So, you know, there are a lot of galleries, but it's difficult because there are all these columns that are there. So it's a variety of different uses, and in some ways, it makes it more interesting. In Paris, the city owned the property underneath, so they mandated that all of the stores had to be selling things that were made on site, which sounds like a great idea, but it didn't work economically, and most of them actually have closed. So, you know, maybe the market will develop sort of a more varied uses.
It's also interesting, the spaces underneath the High Line, while they struck some people as being dark and foreboding, they're actually magnificent spaces. The way the columns come up, it's sort of like an industrial church-like space underneath the High Line. And they are all controlled by the private property owners, and a few people have done really amazing things with them. The Standard Hotel made a beer garden under the High Line, which is a spectacular space. The challenge is you can't only if you treat it as an outdoor space can you leave the ceiling of the High Line as being your actual roof. If you actually develop an enclosed interior, you need to sort of build a box underneath it, and you lose the really magnificent qualities of being under the structure. So the Standard, I think, had a great solution for it, and we hope that other people will figure out dynamic uses that allow the appreciation of the underneath of the structure, which is really quite incredible.
At the very beginning of the High Line, the city controls one space, which they've given over to us, and we're building a restaurant there. So if you come next summer, you'll be able to come to a restaurant that will open right underneath the High Line, right next to the future Whitney.
Yeah, and just another word, we are actually doing a project right underneath the High Line, an extension of our Culture Shed project, which we haven't been able to go up to the underside of the ceiling for exactly, you know, the way that Josh is describing, but it has a lot also to do with the access to the underside of the High Line so that one could do repair work and just have it accessible. So in our case, we have a skylit area so that you can actually, you don't see sky, but you see the underside of the structure. But most, I think, in the future, when people build out, it will be oblivious to the fact that it's under the High Line.
Uma pergunta aqui do Roberto Costa, arquiteto. Ele fala que hoje em dia vários arquitetos e urbanistas falam muito de envolver a comunidade no processo de design, mas na realidade poucas vezes isso se faz para valer. Ele pergunta qual foi o maior desafio em trabalhar com a comunidade, em mediar a interesses tão diversos.
Yes, well, I mean, at the risk of, I remember our designers weren't that crazy initially about going to the community early on, because I think there was a real fear that the community can kill things that are sort of half-baked. Or when the designers are first starting out ideas, you know, they don't have the fancy, beautiful renderings yet. It's just an idea. And I think they were fearful that if the community didn't like them off the bat, that we would stop them. And that was something, again, that I think is really important, is it's not, you don't have to do everything the community says. I think it's very important, and you're not, the goal is not to design by consensus. And so we didn't instruct our designers to make everyone happy. I mean, I think you have to have sort of a strong client that has, you know, that helps protect the designer's own vision. But I think over time, as we've done the process, and because we've done it in so many stages, now everyone has gotten very comfortable with the process. The other thing is we're often not able to answer every question at the design, at those open meetings. So we would answer every question and put them all online. So people could, you know, even if they weren't able to attend, they could find any question they had, someone else had, and we could answer it. I don't know, it'd be interesting to hear y'all's experience.
I was just going to say, I mean, I think what's interesting is that there were many times that I remember when we went to the community and talked about a certain idea that there was actually much more reluctance on the city side than the community was very open-minded. And in fact, they were actually like, sure, why not? Try that, do this. It was in some ways, very different than I think what we had expected. There were a lot of people there who were really interested in doing something new. And so that was a kind of surprise. And I also remember that we did have the big public forums, but there were also small dinners and different ways that we could actually have more of a dialogue and a conversation with people, where we would go to the public housing units and we would talk in a much more intimate way, which I think was really useful.
I have a slightly different answer. I think on the one hand, I've learned over the years also with the Lincoln Center project, these were big projects with lots of stakeholders, and that you typically want to keep some of the decisions out of the hands of too many stakeholders. You ask for too many opinions, you get answers that you don't want to hear. But I've found that this is all an educational process, and people don't actually know. They don't know how to respond to a question because they don't understand the vision. And very often, they won't understand the vision until it's executed, and it's just it's walking a tightrope on this. On the one hand, you really do want to democratize the process more. It shouldn't be so top down, it should be more integrated. At a time of social media, there's so many ideas about everyone being involved in design, but it very often takes someone like a visionary it could be like you guys, or it could be a designer that has this vision, that puts it forward, and then if it's a good idea, it will probably happen somehow, and if you have the perseverance, and you're able to demonstrate, and you're able to show people and bring them along, I think that I give a lot more credit to the public than I did when I started this.
Raul, se você me permite mais uma pergunta. Como eu disse anteriormente, essa pergunta é para o Joshua e para o Robert. Como eu disse anteriormente, vocês não são planejadores, arquitetos, urbanistas. Entretanto, vocês mostraram uma operação urbanística que é a transferência do potencial construtivo para algumas áreas. Eu queria saber como é que surgiu essa ideia, vocês foram assessorados, e se essa ideia também ela foi implementada depois, e como é que foi esse processo de implementação dessa transformação. Porque sabemos que é uma mudança de parâmetros urbanos, isso envolve mudanças de maior escala e de maior discussão pública. Eu queria saber como é que foi esse ponto específico.
To begin with, I think, again, reiterating the fact that I think our lack of experience in all of these realms was one of our great advantages, in that we were required, because we had so little experience, to bring in people who were well-versed in all of the different fields that you need to know about to take this forward. And we were, because of that process, very well advised. We had people who joined our board early on who had experience in bringing large projects forward on the real estate development side, on the city government side. We had people who came to us who were I don't know what the word for them in Portuguese is, but lobbyists, who help bridge the gap between a group like ours and government, who helped us negotiate the community board process, how to get a project through the community board, how to get a project past City Hall, and so those advisors were very key to the project, and very helpful in advancing it. I think from what we did bring to it was, I think Robert and I both had an extensive communications experience in being able to communicate the vision of the project well. I was a writer, Robert had been working in startup internet projects, and I think both of those skill sets were very helpful in being able to carry the whole vision forward.
I wanted to say one thing, and these guys cannot be credited enough for what they did. I mean, this doesn't happen every day in New York, and it was this incredible. They saw it, they got it before anybody else did. And I have to also mention just the Bloomberg administration has been the most progressive administration that New York has seen. And Amanda Burden, who's the planning commissioner, was such a advocate of the project that it was, I think the way when we step back, we see this amazing alignment of the stars, that you couldn't have done it without the grassroots activist approach that these guys took, because government could not have been pushed without it. And then the government that happened to be there, that some people in the government had a vision, that shared the vision and was able to kind of bring it up the ladder and make everyone understand. So, that moment is coming to an end, 3 months away from the change of that administration. But I think that so many initiatives in New York happen, public space related initiatives happen in the last 12 years. They were amazing.
I think just to say one more thing about that, I mean, the interesting thing is that people always sort of ask like who our client was, and in fact it was 5 different entities. 4 were from the city, and then also Friends of the High Line. And that meant that every 3 weeks or whenever we would sort of show progress on design, we had what we called a development team that had leaders from all of those different agencies. It wasn't just, one sort of single person that we were sort of communicating with along the way.
2 perguntas aqui relacionadas do André Palatnik e da Beatriz. Eles perguntam se o Highline é aberto 24 horas, 7 dias da semana, se há problemas de segurança, roubos, assaltos, etc. Mas principalmente ambos perguntam como é um parque público administrado privadamente, como é a manutenção financeira. A Beatriz, inclusive, ela pergunta quanto custa a manutenção por ano e como, porque muitos projetos, com o tempo, são abandonados em termos de manutenção.
Yeah, so the Highline is open every day, 365 days a year. As Josh mentioned, in the past 5 years, it's only been closed 1 day because of snow and 1 other day because of a hurricane. It's open till 11 o'clock during the summer, 10 o'clock in the fall and spring, and in the winter it closes at 8 o'clock, and it opens every day at 7 in the morning. So it's different how the Highline is managed. So Friends of the Highline is a private group. The Highline is owned by the city, but we manage it under a license agreement with the city. So everybody you see on the Highline, every maintenance worker, gardener, people cleaning the bathrooms, are all employed by Friends of the Highline. And 100% of that funding is raised privately. Our budget's about $5 million, and we raise all of that privately, so we don't get any city money. In terms of building the Highline, over half of it was given by the city. The rest of that we raised privately. So it's a different arrangement. It's similar, the model, as Josh pointed out in the presentation, was Central Park. Central Park, New York's biggest park, is also privately managed, and I think 85% of that funding is privately raised.
And in terms of a very real fear, and it's a fear that Robert and I had at many times and still have, of what happens if I think the question says the park is abandoned and it deteriorates. I think one of the key things that often leads to that is a change of governmental allocations. That's what happened to Central Park back in the 1970s. The government cut the park's budget and the park declined very severely. While there are a lot of things one can debate about in terms of the role of a private organization like ours in maintaining and funding a public park, one of the things it does provide is a certain base of stability. You're building a constituency base that's invested in the future of the park, that comes from the community and the city and across the city, that in some ways is less vulnerable to vast changes in public funding than a change in administration might be.
Well, and one of the disadvantages of the success is now, for this last section that Liz and Lisa were showing you, the city is contributing very little. So we're having to raise all of that privately to be able to finish the designer's vision there.
I just wanted to say 1 or 2 things about security, since that came up in the question, and you guys can jump in on that too. But I mean, almost I think actually all of the New York City parks close at dusk, so they're not usually open, but because the High Line is elevated, it is a little bit more controlled. It's easier to sort of make sure that people don't come up there at night. But I think since its opening, there hasn't been 0 incidents of crime. And I think which is kind of unheard of, and part of that is because I think it is so well loved and valued, and part of it is also that there are you know, the sort of stand old eyes on the park type of a thing. There's these new developments that are going up. It actually, it's very, in some ways it's public. I mean, people see it. There are different, there's activity around it, and it's been remarkable in terms of how well it's been used and how little there has been any of these other issues.
Duas perguntas aqui para o Washington, Fajardo. O Lauro Cavalcante, do Paço Imperial, pergunta em relação à perimetral, se a demolição se restringe à área do porto ou será estendida ao setor da Praça 15, no aeroporto, e também se você vê locais no Rio de Janeiro que poderiam passar por uma regeneração utilizando algumas das lições do High Line.
A demolição da perimetral é total, isso, então também envolve a área da Praça 15, o que eu acho que é uma região que vai se beneficiar muito da saída da perimetral. Então, acho que, de fato, temos, acho que a gente vai poder ficar livre de um elemento que eu acho que é bastante agressivo. Eu só queria mostrar uma outra dimensão, que eu acho que eu também vejo com um pouco de similaridade, mesmo em outra escala, que é o caso das pinturas do Profeta Gentileza. Nós temos uma pintura nas estruturas da perimetral, feito por um artista de rua, e, através de um movimento comunitário, essas pinturas foram reconhecidas como patrimônio da cidade. Esse mesmo grupo também lutou e conseguiu, por seus próprios meios, fazer a restauração dessa pintura nas estruturas da perimetral. E mesmo com a saída da perimetral, essas estruturas permanecerão. Com relação a outra pergunta, sim, eu acho que identificamos outras áreas e lugares que poderiam receber operações semelhantes. Eu vou citar aquelas com que a gente lida muito cotidianamente. A situação, por exemplo, do Cosme Velho, onde existe uma organização muito boa por parte dos moradores, e temos com eles, às vezes, diálogos bem intensos e, às vezes, até algumas brigas, mas é uma relação, acho, muito proveitosa para a ação pública ter esse modo de diálogo. Do mesmo modo, no Porto, quando foi revelado, então, o caso Valongo, também a criação do circuito da herança africana, que também envolveu de uma maneira significativa, e foi, na verdade, a definição do circuito foi feito junto com a comunidade afro-brasileira existente ali na região do Porto e de outras áreas da cidade. Estamos hoje, por exemplo, também olhando muito a situação do Centro Psiquiátrico Nice da Silveira, no Engenho de Dentro, onde existe também associações comunitárias, como uma em específica que é muito interessante, que se chama Norte Comum, que é uma organização da sociedade local com o objetivo de criar espaços, inventar espaços de encontro, espaços culturais, numa região que tem carência desse tipo de espaço. Acho que a prefeitura é bastante aberta a esse tipo de iniciativa. O que eu acho que é muito interessante de observar no caso do High Line, mais uma vez, é ver como o trabalho se deu com um sonho muito forte, mas, ao mesmo tempo, estabelecendo passos muito efetivos e com uma base muito realista, fazendo os lobbies e as pressões necessárias, mas também produzindo uma série de articulações. Eu acho que isso que é relevante pela magnitude da transformação que eles promoveram. Eu acho que, para a gente como sociedade, eu acho que é uma lição como um todo, não apenas, inclusive, para o setor público. Então, acho que vejo, sim, temos diversos locais onde, se é possível, posso citar também o Imperator no Meia, que era um espaço reivindicado pela população e que foi também revitalizado. Mas eu acho que ainda não é exatamente um empoderamento absoluto dessa comunidade local, mas é a comunidade lutando para que o Estado, e no caso específico da Prefeitura, venha a agir.
Uma pergunta aqui do Christoph Twickel, ele é jornalista alemão. Ele pergunta sobre o outro lado da moeda, no aumento do preço do metro quadrado ao redor do High Line. Ele pergunta se a gentrificação dessa área está provocando uma seca criativa ao redor, em onde só os mais ricos podem se beneficiar do High Line.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer a few parts of this question. I mean, one of our fears was the art galleries. One of the things that people were first attracted to in this neighborhood, you know, and as Liz points out, the DIA. And so within the rezoning, it was all manufacturing originally. And when Giuliani was going to rezone it, was going to be all residential. But Amanda Bird and the Planning Commissioner, in an effort to save the gallery districts, in the center where most of the galleries were, they kept it manufacturing. So that lowers the value of the land and kept the galleries. And even what's happened is, even in the areas that are residential, a lot of the developers have charged lower rents for the galleries because it increases the value of the properties, the residential properties. Now, in this manufacturing area, there were very few residents, so it wasn't a gentrification issue in the center of it, where they were going to be pushed out because it was mostly manufacturing. And as part of the rezoning, 30% of the housing, the new housing that would be built, would have to be affordable housing. But, you know, in the areas around the High Line, which it has increased values, you know, you are seeing that gentrification. And, you know, I think you're going to see that anyway in New York, but I think what the High Line has done has sped it up. So I think that is one of the you know, unintended consequences.
I mean, this is a really kind of tricky situation, and it's a paradox. You put so much energy and effort into improving and making a fantastic amenity in a place that's pretty much blight. It was really totally empty and run down, and you're successful. And then success breeds investment. Everyone wants to come there. Lots of people come. People want to eat. People want to stay there, and so forth. And so you go into this kind of cycle of, you know, you produce something great, and then it becomes unaffordable. And I think that it is just a paradox. It kind of drives the way cities develop, and it's very. You could monitor it in certain ways. You can try to make sure that it's not absolutely unaffordable. But you know, the alternative would have been you don't improve it.
Yeah, or, you know, and it's also free and open to the public. One of the ways that we concentrate a lot of our efforts is on these low income. We have a lot of public housing in the neighborhood. So 90% of the children that live in the neighborhood are on a lunch program, on subsidized lunch. So we do a lot of our programmings in that area that have not benefited from some of the changes, you know, we doing job training programs and things like that.
Aproveitando essa pergunta, a maioria dos prédios ao redor do High Line realmente de apartamentos bastante caros. Vocês acham que talvez o governo Bloomberg, quando fez o zoneamento, deveria ter previsto talvez mais unidades habitacionais de conjuntos populares? Ficou faltando isso, talvez?
Well, I mean, what they did is they did incentives. So in those new housing projects that are very expensive, approximately 30% will be devoted for affordable housing. One of the conflicts was people in the community wanted less housing and wanted lower density. So they fought for, in parts of it, to have lower buildings. So, I mean, if you want to create more affordable housing, you have to have more density. You have to have more building. But many people in the community didn't wanted that. So you have that tension of different goals.
I think the 30% though is kind of interesting because it's something that's been sort of, there's the 20/80, 30/70 rule now in New York City with development. And one of the things that it does is it requires, for the most part, you to have integrated affordable with market value retail. And it's changed a bit of the dynamic of having like the projects and then the market rate towers, and you start to have, so the idea behind it was something that would be more integrated, that technically you wouldn't be able to tell if a unit was an affordable unit or a market rate unit.
Uma pequena tragédia em curso, que a gente tem mais 1 minuto e 14 segundos de debate, então vou tentar correr aqui com as perguntas. Peço, assim, a coisa mais antipática do mundo, respostas cada vez mais curtas. Foram previstos pontos elétricos para plugar recarregadores de bateria de computadores?
No.
Okay.
There's one utility built.
Como são as interfaces do Highline com o plano NYC do prefeito Bloomberg?
I'm not
Lendo
sure I
a pergunta.
understand
É do
the
Plan
question.
NYC do Bloomberg. Qual é a relação com o Highline? Se há alguma relação?
Yeah, we weren't part of Plan NYC. That was done actually after the Highline was designed.
Perfeito. Vocês criaram um modelo pontual de projeto a ser aplicado no Highline. Como vocês lidam com as novas oportunidades que surgiram e com as novas portas que se abriram? Se vocês sabiam do impacto que este projeto ia ter em âmbito mundial?
We definitely did not anticipate the impact that this would have. And now we evaluate, we get a lot of ideas of things to do up on the Highline. Again, the space is so limited, a lot of times we just can't do, people come with great ideas and we're not able to do them.
Para o Washington, onde ele pode se encontrar o projeto de inserção urbana e paisagística do BRT?
Tem um site chamado Cidade Olímpica e lá é um excelente caminho inicial para encontrar informações. Lá você tem contato com todos os diferentes projetos da prefeitura e dali, à medida que você tenha mais interesse, você pode acessar outras informações. Então, é um site chamado Cidade Olímpica.
Por último, é importante repetir, este livro, apesar de muito bonito e de as fotos serem incríveis, etc. e tal, não é um coffee table book. Na verdade, mais da metade do livro é, de fato, o relato do Robert e do Joshua de como eles construíram essa grande campanha, todas as dificuldades, diversos causos, que eu acho que para qualquer candidato ativista ou atual ativista tem lições preciosas. Muito obrigado e até à tarde.